because they don't get treatment in time. Which of us does not have a story to tell about a friend, a relative, a friend of a friend, maybe, who's had a really horrific story? Now, the government, in response to the Poulter defection, say, oh, well, look, we're spending more on the health service and we're reducing waiting. This doesn't alter the fact that they're still record length. And so for the Prime Minister, things could not be worse. And this, of course, is in days away from the local elections on Thursday, when it is confidently predicted that the Conservatives will lose hundreds and hundreds of seats and possibly 2 metro mayors. So we've been hearing in recent days about how Sunak has had a reset, yet another reset. They're sorting out welfare reforms and getting Rwanda through and increasing defence spending, but all that will just be blown right up of the water come Friday, when the sums have been done and the Tories realise just how badly the voters judge them.
Well, we shall have to wait and see on that one, Peter, won't we? You never know, it could go the other way. Never know till people have their say. Look, meanwhile, off the back of the defection, there's now this group of MPs trying to, have a 100-day blitz, new policies, 100 days to turn it round before the election and get Penny Mordaunt in as Prime Minister. I wonder how serious that is and whether that will push Rishi Sunak to actually call an election for July.
Well, of course, it's always possible that there will be some 50 or so, just over 50 Tory MPs who actually call for a vote of no confidence, and it could come to that. When it comes to actually a policy blitz under Penny Mordaunt, I've looked at these policies and they're same old, same old. There's no getting around it. And then if I were sort of just the archetypal voter, I'd be thinking, well, I don't know, they promised this stuff before, they're promising it now. Now they've got a different person who's pretty good at holding up swords. But so what difference is that supposed to make? Absolutely diddly squat. And I have to say that also you'll be looking at a situation where the voters are again going to be thinking, look, how many leaders does it take before you take the hint? And I mean, what it will presage is yet more Tory turbulence, which is why, of course, old hands within the party say, look, just dream on, guys. This is just total la-la.
And what do you think of Penny Mordaunt in all of this? I mean, she's distanced herself from the plotters so far, but do you think she could be the one to unite the Tory party and be a game changer in all of this?
Well, I mean, she does present a more moderate face, or the moderate face of the Conservative Party, most certainly. And it's actually quite interesting. There's a sidebar from Dan Poulter, is that he's unhappy about the way the Conservative, in his judgment, has become more right-wing and more nationalist. So, in a sense, he is the silent majority finally finding its voice. And it is possible that Penny Mordaunt would be indicative of the personification of precisely that. But we're talking a few months at most before there's a general election. The chances of altering public perception of the party within a timescale like that are just zero. There's just no chance she can do it, however clever she is.
OK, Peter, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Well, if you've got a view on that, gbnews.com/yoursay. Already, where is it? William Howard, morning William, has been in touch saying, well, if you defect to another party, it should automatically trigger a by-election. Which I think is a fair point.
I mean, Dan Poulter has said he didn't want to do that to his constituents, considering there is going to be probably a general election this year, which is fair enough, I suppose. But he says he's going to stand down either which way, isn't he, at the next general election? That's what he would say.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's interesting. Is it the death knell for the party? Is it not? Is this move to get Penny Mordaunt in as Prime Minister a sensible thing to do for the Tories? Or not? Love your thoughts on all of that this morning. gbnews.com/yoursay.
Now, British troops could be deployed on the ground in Gaza to help deliver aid via a new sea route.
Well, the US has said that no American forces would go ashore and an unnamed third party would drive trucks along a floating causeway onto the beach.
Well, the UK is understood to be considering tasking British troops with this when the aid corridor opens next month.
Well, Whitehall sources saying no decision has been made, and both the Ministry of Defence and the Israeli army have so far declined to comment.
Well, Defence Editor for the Evening Standard, Robert Fox, joins us live now. Good to see you this morning, Robert. And is this something that is wise, putting British troops on the ground in Gaza?
It's something British troops could do, and some might say it's the sort of thing that British troops ought to do. But we have the terrible cover, as it were, of the American argument that they won't put their troops in harm's way. And in this kind of operation, America has form. America held up going into Kosovo in 1999 because they were worried about force protection. There was very little opposition. It's very strange the way they operate. They're very well aware of force protection, by the way, in Afghanistan, and yet took huge amounts of casualties when they took over a hotspot like Sangin from British forces. Now, the wider aid operation, I think, is going to be a very important, and always has been an important part of British forces. But I do understand the reticence of Whitehall, and particularly Number 10, in that they want cover and guarantees. I think, one, there must be a UN mandate, and I think the Israelis, Hamas and Islamic Jihad must be explained what the rules of engagement are. There is a potential of vulnerability from either side. But I think it can be done. But I think Britain would want to do it with an ally, and I would suspect that would be a Scandinavian and possibly France.
Well, couldn't you? I mean, why can't it be done on? And I don't know quite how these things work, Robert, but under the banner of UN peacekeeping.
I think that's exactly what it would be if they were blue helmets. We're only talking, I think, of a few hundred drivers. It's quite limited, but they are, as you rightly read in your from your intro, that they're going on the beach. They are potentially in harm's way. But I'm finding this very, very difficult. Potentially, that's what happens to soldiers, people in the armed services. You don't expect to get killed or shot, but risk is inherent in it. And this is a very good thing. I think Lord Cameron will want this to happen because it gives Britain leverage, and they really want to bring the whole Gaza-Rafah business to a conclusion within weeks. That's when they've really got to push the Israelis on that as well as Hamas, because they really want it wrapped up. And who wants it most of all? Joe Biden, because he doesn't want to go into a general election campaign. That is the election post the conventions for the presidency, with all this hanging around still. He's going to have Ukraine, and he's going to have Ukraine big time, and he's still got the Houthis, but he wants this one, I think, resolved. Whether he'll get it, I think it's about 50-50 at the moment.
What is the situation with the aid corridors in Gaza at the moment, by land and by sea? Well,
there is limited access. A certain amount seems to be delivered on the periphery. And I'm not going to use fancy words because it's completely the wrong way to do it. This building, this elaborate, ingenious idea of building an offshore harbour, causeway, facility, sounds fantastic, doesn't it? And we've seen all the grainy black and white films and documentaries and mockumentaries about World War II and the Mulberry Harbour after D-Day, which was such a success. This absolutely isn't the way to do it. You want a humanitarian corridor from the north, and it would have to be the south, considering the bulk of the population. So many of the refugees of the Palestinians have now gone to the south, up from Egypt, but parties are not willing to do it. And that's what a robust UN would do. You would have guaranteed humanitarian corridors with very robust rules of engagement. Oops. Think of getting that past the Security Council with China and Russia having a veto.
Yeah. Look, sort of closer to home, if you like, Robert. What's this about a hypersonic missile that we're planning to build in the UK?
Well, we're paying a bit catch-up there, but
well,
hypersonics are all over the place, and there's a dreadful fear that the Chinese particularly are ahead, and the Russians have been using them. They've been quite effective in downing them. But this is why things are so tricky. It's funny, we're talking about Gaza. I mean, the things are on a knife edge over the next few days and weeks in Ukraine, as we see the battle of the breakout from Avdiivka and Bakhmut at this mountain or high place called Chaziv Yar. The problem is it's all being done by electronic warfare. It's very difficult to envisage this because somebody who had been on the front line was explaining to me, you know, you put up drones, you put up this, that and the other, and you have to go through what he called was an electronic barrier hidden, which is downing a lot of the drones on both sides. This is why we got the announcement in Poland from the Prime Minister is, gosh, we're getting into the game. We're very good on certain kinds of weaponry, but we are late on a lot of it. We are, although we have global ambitions, we're not a global power, and we need pals. And I think the reliable pals are emerging to be from the north, the Nordics, the Scandinavians, the Baltics, which are small, and Poland.
Oh, OK. Robert, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Now, at 16 minutes past 6, let's take a look at some other stories coming to the newsroom.
Well, 2 men have been arrested at a pro-Palestine protest in London yesterday. Police say one of the men holding a placard with a swastika. The other made a racist remark towards counter-protesters. The event, organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, was calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
Humza Yousaf is asking leaders of rival parties to find common ground with the SNP as his leadership hangs in the balance. His spokesperson has ruled out any sort of electoral pact with Alex Salmond's Alba party. A spokesperson dismissed this idea as fantasy. It comes as Mr Yousaf reaches out to political opponents ahead of a no-confidence motion expected this week after he ejected the Greens from his government.
And a gold pocket watch, it's beauty as well, recovered from the body of the richest man on the Titanic, has been sold at auction for a record-breaking £1,175,000. It's only been expected to fetch about £150,000. The previous high amount for a Titanic artefact was £1.1 million for a violin that was played as the ship sank.
And the White House Correspondents' Dinner in the US has wrapped up in Washington, D.C. Upon arrival, journalists and politicians were met by pro-Palestinian protesters seeking to disrupt the event. President Biden made the most of the situation and the dinner by poking fun at his predecessor and presidential opponent, Donald Trump.
Of course, the 2024 election is in full swing. And yes, age is an issue. I'm a grown man running against a 6-year-old. Well, Donald's had a few tough days lately. You might call it stormy weather. What the hell?
Talking stormy weather, heavy rain is set to cause disruption in London and across the country this weekend, with Network Rail warning of cancellations to mainline services. Oh, what a surprise.
Oh, wow, yes. Southern, Gatwick Express and Thameslink networks could be affected from Saturday afternoon, when rain is set to splash the capital, and today as well.
Well, weather journalist Nathan Rao is here in the studio this morning. A lot of pressure on you, Nathan, today.
Good morning, both. Good morning, Ellie.
Good morning, Nathan.
Good morning.
Good morning. There is a lot of pressure on me this morning. Yes, it's going to be rainy. It is very, very wet. It's not feeling like spring at all.
What's going on, Nathan?
Yeah, well, we are, as always, we're subject of the whims and fancies of the jet stream, and the jet stream is not treating us very well at the morning. Today, as you mentioned, in the southeast and the east of the country, there is going to be more heavy rain. Today is looking very rainy. In fact, there may be rain anywhere in the country, but mainly the east. Then as we go into the week, the rain threat is going to move to the west, but it is going to remain unsettled. It may be turning a bit milder, a bit warmer than it has been, because it has been freezing, literally literally in parts of the country. The low pressure is going to move to the southwest of the country. That's going to bring in a southerly airflow, so we get some warmer temperatures. But it's still looking unsettled, unfortunately. So if you're hoping for a scorchio, you are not going to get one.
When are we going to get one?
I have no idea, and it doesn't look imminent.
Oh, no.
I know. The outlook really for the next week, it's going to get milder, as I said, but that's sort of because of a warmer airflow from the southwest, and that's not a hot and sunny warm. It's sort of like a milder but still unsettled warm. And then as we go into May, it's looking average, slightly above average at times, slightly below average at times, nothing special. And then as we go further ahead, I was looking at the Met Office's long-range forecast this morning, and that goes up to June. There is a 25% chance that the season will be warm and a 10% chance the season will be cool, which doesn't really tell us very much.
Oh, no.
So I can't promise you anything brilliant, I'm afraid.
Nathan, you haven't been the bearer of good news this morning.
I know, but that's why you get me in. But it's getting warmer. They had minus 6.6 this week in Scotland, and we could get...
Did they?
Yeah, they did. They and a touch of snow in the forecast. It's been really, really weird.
Well, the rain kept me up last night, but there is going to be disruption throughout the day today, isn't there, in terms of on our rails?
Yes.
And the roads, I suppose.
And there are some Environment Agency flood alerts in place across the southeast. As I mentioned, low pressure is sort of dancing around the country at the moment. And today, the effect of low pressure is going to bring that rain to the east and the southeast of the country. As we go through the week, it's going to move to the west. A bit colder on Monday morning. In fact, we could get some pretty chilly temperatures in the morning tomorrow. Still feeling a bit like winter.
I know.
And then as we go through the week, as I said, that high pressure, low pressure will anchor to the southwest and bring in some southerlies.
I have some sympathy.
Do you, with me?
For forecasters.
Yes, good. I hope you do.
Because apparently it has been a very warm April.
Yes, it has.
Which is what people were saying, but it doesn't feel like it's been a very warm April.
No.
So it feels like you got it wrong.
No, I didn't, and we'll come on to this in a minute. It feels like it was a very warm April. The average temperatures for April may come in slightly above average because we had 22 degrees at the beginning of April, and that sort of bumps up the average. And the average isn't very high anyway, it's only about 8. But now we're getting this very cold weather in the north, and we might just scrape a few higher temperatures at the end. It could bring the average up. But it's sort of been an average April. April does do this. In the words of the lyrical genius Prince Rogers Nelson, sometimes it snows in April. And it might do. But it may come in a bit warm. It's going to feel not so much, though. If you get some sunshine and clear skies, that's when you'll feel the warmth. But if you're in the rain, or if you're like I was this morning, charging through torrential downpours into Paddington, it's going to feel pretty miserable. But improving as the week goes on, depending on where you are.
OK. Nathan, thank you very much indeed. Don't pack away your winter coats would be the advice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
See you very, very soon.
Thanks, Nathan.
I was a bit critical of weather forecasters this morning.
Yes, you were.
And I heard him.
And he did hear me.
Nathan heard
so,
everything.
Yeah, you know, in the green room, and I hear you slagging me off.
I wasn't slagging it. I just said everyone seems to get it wrong.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I've got a bone to pick, to be fair, with Jim Dale, because he was telling me it was going to be a lovely hot April, and here we are.
I think he's going to be coming to clear the record on that at some point.
I think he's going to have to.
Yeah, me and Jim are like that, yes. I've had a chat with Jim, and we're...
And he told me a few weekends ago it wasn't going to rain. It rained all weekend, Jim.
See, so it's not
we just like to keep you on your toes, you know?
It's not just me that's been having a moan.
I'll forgive you this once.
Yeah, there you go. And I've still got words to have with
Note
Jim
to
Dale.
self, check who's in hearing range when you have a winch.
But it's not an easy job, is it, predicting the weather, to be fair?
With some people, no.
Well, let's check in with somebody else who might know, Marco.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update for the Met Office for GB News. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across the UK today. Rain at times towards the east, generally a bit brighter the further west you go, but temperatures still struggling for the time of year. Confirmation then of a pretty wet picture across some central and many eastern parts of England. Towards the southeast we could see skies brightening briefly, but this could set off some pretty heavy, potentially even thundery showers for a time. Whereas towards the west and northwest are generally bright today here, but again notice a few showers dotted around as we go through the day. Temperatures really struggling under the rain towards the east, coupled with quite a strong northerly breeze, no better than 9 or 10 degrees in places here, whereas in the best of the sunshine further west was the highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. As we go through the evening into the overnight period, those outbreaks of rain will push away to the northeast, affecting the Northern Isles into the early hours of Monday. Elsewhere, it will turn clearer for a time, but notice further showers gathering out towards the west, some of those starting to merge to longer spells of rain towards the morning. And other clear spells out towards the east, it will turn quite chilly. Could see a local frost by Monday morning in 1 or 2 spots, but generally those temperatures picking back up as these showers come back in across the west there. As for Monday, well, again, an east-west split developing in the weather, but this time a reversal of fortunes, with the east and southeast seeing the best of the dry and bright weather. Whereas out towards the west, there'll be plenty of showers around. Those showers, again, merging at times to some longer spells of rain. And although pretty wet out towards the west, temperatures generally starting to pick up, with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius towards the north, up to 15 or 16 degrees in the southeast.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I haven't seen Marco before, have you?
Yes. Marco Patania.
All right.
There you go. Very exotic name, isn't it?
Welcome, Marco.
He does a good pasta.
Yeah, and he knows his stuff. He knows his onions. He was telling us it was going to rain today.
Yeah.
And it is. Anyway, staying with us, Aidan McGee is going to join us shortly with all the latest sports news.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections,
we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News. 2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's
Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Aidan McGee's got your sport at 6:28. Good morning.
Good morning to you both. Good to see you.
Should we talk about a bus stop?
Why not? Yeah, I mean, it's not often we see bus stops on the touchline between managers and players anymore. That's something very much from a different era, just because the scrutiny and the spotlight is on the Premier League like never before. And so, if you can see, I don't know if our radio listeners can see this, but in fact they definitely can't. But
no, they can't. No, I don't think so. But I mean, best of luck to you if you try it.
There is a picture, you can just about make it out, that Mo Salah has been brought on as a 79th minute substitute by Jurgen Klopp. They've just conceded a goal against West Ham to get it back to 2-2. He's been dropped before the game anyway, so that's controversial in itself. And this is a guy who scored 210 goals in 346 appearances. Liverpool have had a wretched few weeks. And then, just as he's going off, Jurgen Klopp says something to Mo Salah. Klopp didn't reveal afterwards what was said, but they had a bit of a row. There was no physical altercation or anything like that. Maybe bust up his overeating it slightly. But then Mo Salah went through the mix zone afterwards, which is where the journalists get to speak to players if they choose to speak. And there's a cordon between them. And if a player doesn't want to speak, generally, Stephen, they put their headphones on and they walk straight through and say, not today. Mo Salah didn't stop, as this is my understanding anyway from someone who was there. He didn't stop, but he did sort of turn around to the reporters and say, if I speak, there will be fire.
Oh.
This is a relationship which has yielded spectacular results for Liverpool over the last 7 years. It's a bit like when, remember Geoffrey Howe's final speech in the House of Commons? They had this beautiful relationship, didn't he, with Margaret Thatcher over all those years that yielded all that success. And then he just really nails into her rather, in that final speech. There are echoes of that. Liverpool, really, they can win the league, but they're pretty much out of it. Yesterday, having drawn at West Ham. Tensions are high, but having announced that he was leaving back in January, this is turning into a tour bus, which is losing its wheels on its farewell tour, and it's hugely unedifying and hugely embarrassing for Liverpool, and who knows where it's going to end. I think we know Klopp's going to leave. I think Mo Salah will leave as well. He's got a year left of his contract, but I think he's going to head to Saudi.
Right.
Boos were heard at Old Trafford yesterday.
They were, and look, again, Manchester United are becoming increasingly, their fans are becoming incredulous at some of the behaviour of their manager. He says after the game yesterday, and bear in mind, they were 1-0 up against Burnley at home. Burnley look as if they're getting relegated. It's a home banker. And they're 1-0 up with about 11 minutes to go, and they concede a goal in the last 3 minutes against, as I say, a side who was struggling, right? So this is an error by the goalkeeper, Andre Onana. What do you want to hear from your manager? You want to hear, look, that was awful. We need to do better than that. 76,000 people turned up. We've had an awful season. Goodness me, this is on me. This is on whoever. Instead, he says, we are one of the most entertaining and dynamic teams in the league at the moment. This is comical alley stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
And so, again, United are in serious danger of recording their worst Premier League finish since certainly in the Premier League era, definitely, and long before Sir Alex Ferguson's time, probably going back to David Moyes in 2013. David Moyes didn't finish the season that year with United because they did away with him 2 months before the end of the season. Ryan Giggs took over. It looks like he's going to get to the end of the season. I cannot see him being there in the summer. I really can't.
No, it's a shut your door on the way out.
Well, I think it is. Look, you get 2 years at a big club like that, Steve, and then just more than enough time to make progress. They're in a worse position now than they were this time last year. There were hopes the last season. There was progress. This year, not so much. Their home form has been absolutely dreadful. And for Manchester United, a club of that size and stature, to be languishing miles off the Champions League spaces it's just not acceptable, especially not for the new owners. When you've got a new boss in the building, you've got to impress, haven't you?
Should we talk about Aston Villa and Chelsea?
Yeah, why not? Just a brief touch on this, because it was more about a VAR controversy, really. Villa were leading 2-0. Chelsea turned it round. They looked as if they were going to win it in the very last minute, and VAR chalked off the goal. Now, Chelsea have had a wretched week. They lost 5-0 to Arsenal on Tuesday. You just don't know which Chelsea team is going to turn up. It's like a box of chocolates in Forrest Gump, isn't it? Where you just don't know what you're going to get. They played really well against Man City last week, and again, Chelsea might have a decision to make in the summer with Mauricio Pochettino. I just want to touch on a couple of issues at the bottom as well. Nottingham Forest faced Manchester City. That has implications for the top and bottom of the table. Everton secured survival yesterday by beating Brentford. Sheffield United got relegated with a 5-1 defeat at Newcastle, with their manager Chris Wilder saying the Premier League is just too powerful for us.
We've got some bitter rivals facing off at 2 o'clock, though, haven't we?
Huge game.
It'll be great.
Season defining, possibly for both of them. I think if Tottenham were to lose ground here, Arsenal are slight favourites, but this is the derby. Out of all the top 6 derbies that you find, this is the one in the Premier League era that has delivered time and time again. There's a whole litany, a whole tapestry of wonderful matches between these two teams over the last 30-odd years, and even before that. And as I say, Arsenal slight favourites, 2 o'clock kick-off, Ellie, at White Hart Lane. Tottenham have their own Champions League ambitions. Villa slipping up yesterday opens the door for them to catch up and maybe make some inroads into that Champions League spot, which would be huge progress for them. But Arsenal are going for the league. Tottenham cannot have Arsenal winning the league title. Arsenal haven't won it since 2004. Their manager, Mikel Arteta, was in touch with Arsene Wenger this week, just asking for a few hints and handy hints and a bit of know-how in terms of getting his team over the line. But a win today at Tottenham would be a huge boost for them.
Yeah, would be. And should we touch on the tennis?
Why not, yeah. So Rafa Nadal's been suffering with abdominal injuries over the last 3 months. He was knocked out 10 days ago of the Barcelona Open by Alex de Minaur, the Australian. He took his revenge on de Minaur yesterday with a straight sets win in Madrid. Now, look, I'm jumping a bit far ahead here. The May the 26th is the start of the French Open. That is the King of Clay's big tournament. He's won it 13 times. Can he be fit? Can he keep himself together in time to win that? You'd think he was trying to time his run, much like Emma Raducanu timing her run to be in peak form for the Grand Slams in the summer. And let's see if he can do it. He's, as I say, it's been a real difficult time for him. But he said yesterday after these matches, he said, only if I feel capable enough to compete will I be at the French Open on May the 26th. And we all hope he's there, because it looks like it's going to be his last season on the tour.
Can't believe 37?
He is.
You'd think he was older, wouldn't he, just because he's been around for so long?
I saw him play... I first set eyes on him in 2003. He was 17, his shorts were like trousers. In fact, I didn't even know they were shorts. They were almost down to his ankles. He was just not physically filled out at all. I couldn't really see how he was going to make a top 2, top 3 player. Shows how much I know, doesn't it? Because he went on to win 22 Grand Slams, and I wouldn't rule him out of the French. If he's fit, the crowd will be behind him because they love him over there. I saw him in a restaurant over there when I was at the French Open. He really engages with the Paris public, even though he's Spanish. And 14 wins at 1 slam, if he could do that this year, that is absolutely extraordinary. But the body has to hold out.
Oh, well, I know that feeling. Hard work. It can be hard work.
So just to be clear, the radio listeners can't see the telly, is that right?
Yeah.
No, not at the minute. But you never know what...
cleared that up.
If you focus hard, you'll be all right. Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
In a bit.
Thank you. It is early, you can be forgiven.
You can, yes.
Now still to come, we are going to be going through the papers with Stephanie Tetchy and Andy Jones. That's next.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
I wonder, is this the fundamental distinction we need to make between Islam, which is a private religion people may practice freely amongst themselves, and Islamism? When you try and place those values upon other people, place that way of being, force it on people who don't want it.
Tom, I have been very much clear about this thing that Islam is a religion and people are free to follow that religion in the UK, in a free Western society. So we have no problem with people following their religion as long as it is not being imposed onto the wider society. And when you talk about drawing a distinction between Islam and Islamism, people like me, you and me, we are drawing that distinction. We're trying to maintain that distinction. But if you look at the commentator from the Muslim community, some commentator, they would like to blur this line and they would ask you, what is Islamism? Where does it exist? Sorry, it does exist. We see it. And the teacher, this incident is an epitome of that kind of, ideology being prevalent, in our society.
Khadija, do you worry that these views are typical for some sections of society? Do you think that there's a problem with some Muslim men, that they have perhaps views that we don't consider to be British values?
There are certain readings of religion which are misogynistic, which are discriminatory, which are homophobic. We need to be honest about it. We need to be calling it out whenever we hear these kind of views. It's been a long time that we are letting these kind of ideologies crawling in, spreading tentacles in British society, and we are just ignoring it in the name of respecting people's culture and religion. You are not suppressed in the UK.
OK, let's have a look at the papers this morning. And The Observer has an exclusive on Conservative MP Dr Dan Poulter defecting to the Labour Party.
The Telegraph follows that same story, revealing some rebel Tory MPs are on a warpath to ditch the Prime Minister.
Sunday Times says Tory MPs under fire over cash for blood victims.
The Sunday Express leads with Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's promise to protect the pension triple lock.
And the Sunday Mirror has people smugglers hiding migrants in former Nazi bunkers before loading them onto small boats to cross the Channel.
Well, joining us this morning to go through the papers is Stephanie Tetchy and Andy Jones. Good to see you both this morning. Andy, let's start with the story on most of the papers this morning about Dan Poulter, the Tory MP who's defected to Labour.
Yeah, duplicitous Dr Dan. In some places, they're not calling him. That's my play on words. But MP Dr Dan Poulter, who was formerly Health Minister, has defected to the Labour Party on the eve of some polls that are coming out this week. He says that he can no longer look his patients in the eye and his NHS colleagues in the eye because of the poor performance of the Conservatives in terms of the NHS. There's 7.5 million people on the waiting list. The tipping point, well, among many different tipping points, said the MP for Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, was he said that in terms of mental health, there were patients, particularly in his constituency, who were having to sort of travel hundreds of miles for treatment. They were kept in windowless rooms and sort of ignored. He said the government isn't serious about the NHS and isn't serious about mental health in particular, and he had reached the tipping point which had made him cross the floor.
He's been very, very critical of the government on health for quite some time now.
Yes, and
it's not like this is out the blue.
No, absolutely not. I mean, the interesting thing is why he's picked now. I suppose the NHS isn't necessarily worse this week than it was sort of 3 months, but clearly his patience has evaporated. He's obviously in a position to know he's a doctor on the front line, he's a psychiatrist, and also obviously he was health minister. He talks in The Guardian about how, when he arrived in politics, the Labour Party had done such a good job of turning the NHS round after sort of the major years and the underperformance of the Conservatives the last time they were in. And he said, whilst he has typically got Conservative votes, he says now is the time for change and now is the time for a change in government.
Well, he is right on that. I think, you know, almost after like 15 years under the Conservatives, the NHS, the quality of services that the NHS are providing is quite, you know, abysmal and quite not as good as it used to be. And to be honest, this is a man who is dedicated to healthcare services. So if he feels like he's lost the trust in the Conservative government, that hopefully a Labour government will be able to get those services up and running, then, you know, all kudos to him.
But would you trust someone who, you know, has campaigned and won as a Conservative who then switches to the opposition?
Yeah, I would, because I think instead, there's a lot of MPs who know what's happening with the Conservatives is it's a sinking ship and they're still trying to hold on to a party which has made a mockery of the NHS. So if he's actually being true with his constituents and saying, actually, it's no longer working under a Conservative government, that's him being honest. And he's saying what we already know about the NHS, rather than selling us a pipe dream, which a lot of these MPs do.
Well, let us know what you think about that. gbnews.com/your say.
Stephanie, let's stay with you, shall we? And we'll look at the front page of the Mirror, and this is about smuggling gangs using Nazi bunkers.
It's a really interesting exclusive report by the Mirror. They sent a reporter near Calais, and this reporter has spotted that a lot of Kurdish men, they're actually hiding out in these bunkers, these World War II bunkers that were built by Hitler. And basically, it's the final spot where they hide before they get into the dinghies. And it seems like there's a growing number of them. And it goes to show how dedicated and desperate these people are, because they will stay in these concrete relics for almost a day, just standing there waiting to get on these boats. And it seems to be growing in their numbers. And this concrete relics, they're located between Calais and Dunkirk. And police have been watching them, but they're very limited in what they can do in trying to stop them. But it kind of begs to ask, what about the £500 million that Rishi Sunak gave to the French government to deal with these kind of things? Because it seems like this money's going to waste and it's kind of powerless in stopping these gangs from getting over the channel.
If you know where they are and you're just sort of watching them and you can't do anything until they actually get in a boat, it seems a bit daft, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I've reported from that area and the sort of ad hoc migrant camps that have come up. But and as you say, the problem is you're not breaking the law until you physically get in a boat and launch, right? So you've got people milling around, and they're a problem for local disorder. One of the other stories, similarly in the front page of the Times, also discusses how the migrant groups are launching from canals, because you can go further inland on a canal and then launch and then sort of just appear in the sea. And then, of course, once you've already got a head of steam, in more ways than one, you're significantly harder to intercept. And they talk about the story of a girl who was tragically drowned. I think she was 7 years old, and they've got a profile of her and her story. But they're saying that they're using increasingly absurd and dangerous boats to try and get as many people across for as much money as they can.
But you just wonder why, I mean, this case with the French, why they can't apply common sense. If you know this is what people are aiming to do, why the laws can't be tweaked to mean you can stop them?
Well, I think you're right, Stephen. I think common sense is actually missing here, and I think it's just got to a point where I think they just don't know how to control it anymore. I think it's gone above their heads. Like this year alone, we've had 7,000 people cross over the channel, and now that this Rwanda bill has gone through, I can imagine it's going to increase even more because people are just desperate to get over the channel. But I just think it's been a waste of £500 million, which could have gone into services here.
Well, possibly. I mean, the argument is, of course, that it's been, the numbers are down by a third or whatever, so it's having an impact.
A slow impact.
But, not as much impact as you want to see.
No, I mean, the overall migration last year was 750,000, wasn't it? The net migrations into the UK.
And the promise was to stop the boats, not limit the numbers.
I mean, we kind of have these these extensive conversations about building an Iron Dome over Britain and increasing our defence spending. And not just in terms of migrants. If you want to be hostile towards Britain, you can just float across on a dinghy and attack us that way. I mean, there's not just economic reasons and housing reasons and social reasons. There are issues of defence attached to this.
I know illegal migration is important. But do we get... I mean, it's what I can't get my head around. You mentioned the net migration figures. Of that, a very small percentage of that is actually the illegal migration.
Yeah.
So if we are concerned about the numbers coming in, I mean, obviously you want to stop the illegal stuff, obviously, but then why don't they just cut down... I mean, why aren't they reducing the legal migration figures?
I just think that actual system has just become so overwhelming. It's like, where do you even start to deal and tackle with all the legal ones, let alone the illegal ones as well? It's just, it's completely overwhelmed, and it's got to that point of tipping point.
I mean, in terms of... We've got this incredible population growth, and then we need more people on the NHS to then look after the people that we've got. And then, of course, they then are obviously going to be more migrants. And also in terms of house building, we say, we need more houses because we keep inviting more people in the country. But also, most building sites, certainly in London and the south, are very often migrants and migrant workers as well. So you're bringing more migrants in to solve the problem of having more migrants who are growing, ageing population, and round and round and round and round it goes.
Honestly. No wonder people get annoyed about it all.
Let us know what you think of that. gbnews.com/your say. Andy, let's have a look at Sir Keir Starmer's pension promise.
Yeah, speaking of ageing populations and growing populations, Sir Keir Starmer has been under pressure to say whether or not he's going to keep the triple lock. He said he's going to keep the triple lock on pensions for at least 5 years. He's done quite an extensive interview or extensive statement to the Express today. The triple lock pension, our overall cost for pensions is currently 124 billion. And so it's a big sum. And other politicians like Lord William Hague has been saying it's completely unsustainable to have the triple lock, which is obviously triple lock, meaning it moves pensions, state pensions up in line with inflation, average wage, or 2.5%, whichever is more. We're told it's too expensive. It's too expensive to handle. But Sir Keir Starmer has said it's essential that we look after pensioners, and we are going to keep it for 5 years. But who in an election year would ever say, I'm going to get rid of the triple lock? When pensioners form such a big part of the bloc.
Well, exactly.
They do, and he does know that. He does have to connect with people who are in the retirement age or approaching retirement age, and I do hope he does stick to his promises, because my mum's always over the moon about triple lock, always talking about it. And I think it's one of those things, we do have an ageing population, so if they're not being provided for or thought of financially, then that's even going to be a bigger crisis for us in the future. So it is very important to honour such people with the support that they need in terms of benefit.
But it's one of those things, isn't it, where it was brought in and now you just can't back out of it, even if it becomes totally unaffordable.
Yeah, William Hague was talking about how fiscally, financially, there is no instrument to just keep it alive, because the more it goes up, the more it has to go up. So it is a very, very difficult thing. But who is going to burst the balloon?
Well, someone in the middle of a term, 18 months, 2 years in is when you get...
I'm 40 years old, and I'm fairly confident that the pension, should I ever get it, I think I'll probably just end up working until I drop.
Really?
I think the state pension will barely exist by the time.
That's what you say.
Yeah, I don't think it'll exist.
No, so what will exist?
Well, it'll all have to be private pensions.
Have to be saving ourselves.
State pension will just...
I think they'll give a lump sum to those who have qualified or paid for their national insurance, and then they'll just go, after that.
Yeah.
That's it, or it will diminish and dwindle down.
You see, with an age, I mean, this is why with the whole, it's a birth rate issue as well, isn't it? So when you've got an ageing population and fewer people being born, how do you pay for it?
No.
I know people sort of think you contribute and therefore your money's being saved in a pot for when you retire, but that's not how it works.
Yeah.
You pay now every month. The money we pay is funding the current lot of state pension, and so we need the youngsters to pay for ours. And they won't. And they won't.
No. But you do hope that the government could factor this in as you are getting older.
Let's have a look at Shirley Ballas.
Yeah. She's one of the hardest working women in showbiz. Strictly Come Dancing judge, incredible dance professional. She's opened up about her breast cancer scare. She says that she found lumpy tissue in her breast and she's undergone 3 biopsies. I think hopefully she is in the all clear, but she says it's been a very emotional journey, which, you know, anybody could really understand. And it just brings this thing where women, when they do talk about, you know, finding lumps and stuff, it's like with men sometimes get embarrassed talking about health scares, and it's the same with women when it comes to their breasts. Either a lot of women are not doing self-checks, or most women try ignore the call to go for a mammogram, and you know you get called for a mammogram if you're aged 50 to 70 every 3 years. But I actually think this should be lower. I think from a young age, women should be getting into that thought of actually you must be checking your boobs, and actually you should go for a mammogram. I don't think breast cancer has any age. I think it can, you know, unfortunately target anybody.
I think a lot of people would welcome that.
Yeah.
Because cervical smears are from 25, aren't they? So that's very young.
So why are we waiting till 50?
Breast cancer, it's funny that you then wait till 50,
It's just too long, and I think, you know, as girls are growing up, they need to be aware of this. But so I think it's always good when celebrities open up about this, and it's really important. So her interview in The Sun is all about just promoting the importance of going for your mammogram when you're called to do so.
It's difficult, though, isn't it? Because it's like the NHS becoming a prevention service rather than which it wasn't ever designed for.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, prevention is
better than cure. Yeah.
But you know, it's how much would it cost to then extend mammograms, and then you've got the smears, and then what about for us? We need, you know, at what stage would they bring in prostate and testicular checks and all that sort of thing? You'd be there for you'd be going. There'd be queues out the door, wouldn't there?
But is that cheaper than
treating somebody?
Treating.
Yeah, I think also we created, and we're guilty of this, we talk about so doom and gloom with the NHS, and obviously rightfully so in lots of ways, and I think we build this climate mentally of people going, I don't want to go to the doctor, I don't want to go because it's going to be too stressful, I'm not even going to try and get an appointment because I won't get one. But I do say, as Stephanie said, you know, do check, if you do find something, go, because so many of these cancers are treatable if they're caught early, and I take your point that if we're having to go and check all the time, it creates strain on the NHS, but obviously treating somebody and catching it early and preventative is significantly less expensive and labour, I think, saving than, you know, ignoring it and waiting until it gets worse.
I do think the NHS needs to be more efficient, though. I've done an official complaint to my GP surgeon.
Oh, have you?
How long is it going to take for them to deal with it?
Well, 10 days, but it's just because they did something which was, like, completely inefficient. And I said, you know, you've not only wasted my time, more importantly, you've wasted your own.
Yeah.
We haven't got any time or money, all the rest of it, and that's what annoys me. When
and
you just
seeing
do
wastage
stuff
in the
so
system,
stupid. Anyway. Andy, to the Telegraph. Anthony Blunt. Heck, I haven't heard that name for a while.
So Soviet double agent Anthony Blunt, who had his knighthood stripped for his double agent, I suppose, where he was very high up in MI5, very high up in the military, very high up in British government, and he was passing secrets to the Soviets. He has been had the finger pointed at him as also being a double agent for Germany during the Second World War. So, in particular, there was a double agent that there was codenamed Josephine, who the British government knew about but were unable to nail or catch the person. And they were passing absolute prime intelligence to the Germans during the Second World War, particularly around Operation Market Garden. Operation Market Garden being our big paratroop dump of men across to try and win mainland Europe back, which subsequently cost about 20,000 British lives. It was a disaster in many ways because the Germans basically knew all about it, and they basically arrived Allied soldiers to drop out of the sky and then just shot them. And these thousands of young men who'd barely had opportunity to train, barely even been in the air before, were shot dead before they even landed, and it was a terrible, terrible tragedy for Britain and its allies. There's an author that has named Sir Anthony Blunt as this person, so not only was he allegedly, obviously, not only was he passing information to the Soviets, apparently he was also passing information to the Germans.
It doesn't beg a belief, does it? I mean, if he's capable of doing one, you think he was capable of doing the other?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, relations with Russia have been very hot and cold over the last century. But we were, I suppose, theoretically fighting on the same side as Russia, and giving Russia information was one thing, although obviously our relations with Russia were very complicated during the Second War. But passing information to the Germans was something absolutely beyond the pale. And I don't think he's ever really justified... I mean, obviously, he's long deceased now, but I don't think he ever really justified his actions or explained them either. He was part of a Cambridge 5 group of former Cambridge graduates who were passing information to various non-British, non-Allied members. But, yeah, he's blamed for the failure of Operation Market by an author today, although he obviously wouldn't be able to defend himself because he's not...
No, it's the trouble with this. It's fascinating reading, Steph, but what you can't ever do is actually get to the bottom of it.
Well, that's what kind of irritates me when these stories come out, because they make good reads, but then again, it feels like it's just left unanswered and the person's not around really to give their point of view or their side of the story.
Yeah, that'd be nice if we could actually uncover some actual proper hard evidence on that one. I do find it all fascinating, especially the Cold War stuff.
Oh, it is.
It's so fascinating, but you do wonder what people were thinking.
Well, yeah, and you've got to wonder what's going on now. I mean, there's two individuals, I think, charged as part of espionage links to China, so I think this is an ever-present threat for us.
Yeah.
Certainly is. Look, thanks both. We'll see you a little bit later on.
Let's get the weather now with Marco.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update for the Met Office for GB News. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across the UK today. Rain at times towards the east, generally a bit brighter the further west you go, but temperatures still struggling for the time of year. Confirmation then of a pretty wet picture across some central and many eastern parts of England. Towards the southeast, we could see skies brightening briefly, but this could set off some pretty heavy, potentially even thundery showers for a time. Whereas towards the west and northwest are generally bright today here, but again, notice a few showers dotted around as we go through the day. Temperatures really struggling under the rain towards the east, coupled with quite a strong northerly breeze, no better than 9 or 10 degrees in places here, whereas in the best of the sunshine further west, we'll see highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. As we go through the evening into the overnight period, those outbreaks of rain will push away to the northeast, affecting the Northern Isles into the early hours of Monday. Elsewhere, it will turn clearer for a time, but notice further showers gathering out towards the west, some of those starting to merge to longer spells of rain towards the morning. And other clear spells out towards the east, it will turn quite chilly. Could see a local frost by Monday morning in 1 or 2 spots, but generally those temperatures picking back up as these showers come back in across the west there. As for Monday, well, again, an east-west split developing in the weather, but this time a reversal of fortunes, with the east and southeast seeing the best of the dry and bright weather. Whereas out towards the west, there'll be plenty of showers around, those showers again merging at times to some longer spells of rain. And although pretty wet out towards the west, temperatures generally starting to pick up, with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius towards the north, up to 15 or 16 degrees in the southeast.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking? You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wine, what is it? Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock, Sunday the 28th of April. Today, Tory rebels plotting to oust the PM following Dan Poulter's defection to Labour.
Is the Rwanda plan already working? Well, the Prime Minister thinks so, as he says migrants heading to Ireland show the scheme is a deterrent.
But in Ireland, anger's brewing over the government's approach to housing asylum seekers, with protests planned today. Doogie Beattie has the latest.
Irish police turn on locals in order to force an immigration centre through.
A dangerous escalation or essential to deliver aid? The government considers deploying British troops on the ground in Gaza.
And it's been a weekend of miserable weather. We'll be looking at how heavy rain across the country is expected to cause travel disruption.
Good morning. Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool farewell is ending on a sour note as he was involved in a bust-up with star striker Mo Salah, who had been dropped for the draw at West Ham, which all but ended the Reds' title hopes. Today, though, it's all eyes on the North London derby this afternoon as Tottenham host Arsenal.
Hello, good morning. We'll see an east-west split in our weather today across the UK. Rain at times in the east, generally a little bit brighter the further west you go. I'll have all the details later.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Someone called Brexit Failure has been in touch. I wish people would use their real names, just because it's weird saying all these odd things. Anyway, it says, why do people assume they should get a good pension? Well, so if there's a system, isn't there, for state pension, and we all pay into it?
Yeah, if people worked hard their whole lives and paid into it every month, they might feel like it would add up to a nice lump sum at the end.
Yeah. Oh, this is an interesting one. Doug says, I'm resident in Dan Poulter's constituency. He's the MP who's defected to Labour, the Tories defected to Labour. He's not liked by the locals, especially when he blocked a much-needed northern bypass. Anyway, goes on and on and on. But not a fan of Dan Poulter. Which is interesting, because obviously he's an MP who actually, I mean, he also works in the health service, who has been very critical of the government for quite some time now. This isn't sort of out of the blue. It would seem he's not really chiming with his Tory constituents anyway.
Yeah, and I wonder how the constituents feel, considering they voted Tory, and now they have a Labour MP.
Yeah.
Do you let us know what you think about that if you live in Ipswich or Suffolk?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but what it has done is spur on the sort of disaffected parts of the Tory party, where Tory rebels are very annoyed it's happening, but according to the Telegraph today, it's led to a whole load of backbenchers working on a 100-day roadmap to turn around their election chances, which apparently involve a policy blitz and then installing Penny Mordaunt as Prime Minister.
Well, of course, this all follows the defection of Dan Poulter yesterday. He is a former health minister who works part-time as a mental health doctor, and he has slammed the Conservatives over failing the NHS, declaring only Labour has the will and trust to reform the NHS.
Our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, is here. I mean, whichever way you look at it, it's a heck of a blow to the Prime Minister.
It is a massive blow for the Prime Minister. And also, I mean, you could argue that Dan Poulter just knows what side his bread's buttered on. Labour is about to win the general election big time, or so we are all assuming. But actually, Dan Poulter has an enormous majority. He is one of very few Conservative MPs who would probably be safe at the next general election, which leads us to assume that he must have actually defected on principle because of the strains on the NHS. I think there are other Conservatives in the party who think that it's true that probably only Labour at this point is able to save the NHS, mainly because every time the Conservatives talk about any form of prioritising resources, they are told that they are privatising the NHS, whereas the issue is sort of less toxic for Labour.
Which is interesting because Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, actually has talked about some pretty big reform.
Wes Streeting is talking about reforms that no Tory Health Secretary would dare to talk about because it would be so extreme and because there would be so much backchat probably from Labour, apart from anyone else, about privatising the NHS. So I think there is probably some truth in what Dan Poulter is saying, although perhaps not in the way that he means it. I mean, that said, what does it mean apart from this one defection? Well, it has certainly got the rebels excited. There are a group of, I would say, about 20 Conservative MPs in the party who really want to see Rishi Sunak out before the next general election. They think that the Tories are heading for an extinction level, that's what they call it, defeat in the next general election. And what they're trying to do now is get some other backbenchers on side. They need a group of 52 MPs to write letters of no confidence in the Prime Minister to trigger a vote of no confidence. And they're trying to whip up some support for that now. They want to gather around Penny Mordaunt as the next potential leader. Their calculation is that if they get those 52 MPs to write letters of no confidence, there would be this vote. Sunak would probably win it, but then they would persuade him that his position was untenable and he would have to stand down anyway. I'm not so sure that's right. I think if he were to win a vote of no confidence, Rishi Sunak would stay on. He's calculated that lots of his policy plans will come to fruition later in the year, and that later in the year the Conservatives will be in a better position.
What do you think of Penny Mordaunt's role in all of this? Because she's distanced herself from the plotters, hasn't she? But do you think she could be that uniting figure for the Tory party?
I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, in some ways, yes, she has got... She's got the sort of gravitas. I mean, I think the sword at the coronation, as ridiculous as it sounds, did lend her some sort of gravitas. And she does have friends both on the right and the left of the party. That said, there are plenty of Conservative MPs who really don't like her and who say that she is pretty vacuous and that actually she only has friends on the left and the right of the party because she doesn't really believe in anything herself. The other huge issue, of course, with Penny Mordaunt, which isn't her fault, but she has a very, very small majority in her Portsmouth seat. And, of course, it would be incredibly embarrassing for the Conservatives if their leader and the Prime Minister were to lose her seat in the general election.
Oh, wouldn't it just? Wouldn't it just? It also begs the question in all of this, why would anyone like Penny Mordaunt want to take up the mantle of Prime Minister when it's your party is expected to lose a general election, in the months beforehand? Because, it tends to be that if you lose a general election as leader, you step back.
Well, exactly. And I suppose the thing with Penny Mordaunt, it comes back again to this small majority. In a way, she has nothing to lose. It would be more sensible for a leadership hopeful to wait until after a crushing defeat in the general election and then try and raise the Conservative Party phoenix-like out of the ashes. But Penny Mordaunt perhaps doesn't really have that choice because she is likely to lose her seat. So for her, it might be worth that kind of final roll of the dice. And I think that is how a lot of Conservative MPs are viewing it as just one final roll of the dice. Even if they know that the Conservatives will probably lose anyway, they want to mitigate against an absolutely huge defeat, because the size of the Conservative defeat really, really matters. If, as some of the predictions are suggesting, there are only sort of just over 100 MPs on the Conservative benches, Labour will be able to get through some, its most radical measures. Whereas if there's a really strong opposition, then it'll be a sort of fairer fight in government, and there's a higher chance of a Conservative government next time round. And I think lots of Conservatives are now looking at the next election, not this one.
Go on.
Oh, sorry, we've got so many questions we've got to ask you. Just back to Dan Poulter, because I'm very interested in the timing of all of this, because if he wants to step down at the next election, which could be as early as July, why would he not just hang on? Is this anything to do with the local elections that we're going to be seeing this week, do you think?
I think there's an element of that. I mean, there is going to be a lot of... the morale in the Conservative Party, we expect, will be very, very low after the local elections next week. And I think quite a lot of plotters and rebels will start showing their hand at the end of next week. It could be that Dan Poulter is keen to prove to his constituents and to the general public that this isn't a cynical move. If he moved next week after a disastrous Conservative defeat, then it would look as though he just knew what side his bread was buttered on and wanted to be with the party who was going to win the next general election. By doing it now, he can sort of stave off some of those criticisms, and he has been very, very clear on his reasons for changing party, and it is all, according to him at least, about the NHS.
OK, Olivia, thank you very much indeed. We'll catch up with you later. I was just having
Sorry,
a quick...
did I steal your question? You had a question as well.
Yeah, but it was only about... I was just talking about the likelihood of a July election.
Oh, yeah, well, I wanted to know that as well.
Because
I really hope not, because I've booked my holidays.
But I just think if there's enough momentum building up, wouldn't the Prime Minister want to sort of not risk being ousted unceremoniously?
My instinct is still that he will hold off for a later in the year general election, just because there are all of these policies that he's putting into place now which will come to fruition, he hopes, later in the year. I mean, why would he call a general election after working so hard on the Rwanda plan before flights have actually taken off to Rwanda, for example? And there's interest rates too, which we are expecting to go down. Why call a general election while people are still in mortgage hell when he could just wait 6 months when things will hopefully be on a better trajectory?
OK.
Very good point.
Olivia Hartley, thank you very much indeed.
Oh, it's fascinating stuff. You're not happy.
Oh.
You're not happy. You're not happy with lots of quite nasty things about Dan Poulter.
Oh, no.
Stephen Emmett says Dan Poulter has helped Rishi Sunak because it's one less letter at the 1922 committee. But there you go. A lot of people saying Labour and the Conservatives are too close. They're very similar at the moment. Penny Mordaunt is not the answer. She's just like the incumbent. There you go. It just all feels like it's falling apart a little bit.
It does a little bit. Let us know what you think about a July election as well. Would you rather see an election sooner rather than later?
Yes.
Or do you think the PM should hang on until a little bit later on in the year when things, he hopes, start to work?
I just sort of think, get on with it now. I'm fed up of waiting.
Well, you've been saying
I thought we could have had a May election, but then obviously that hasn't happened. But I sort of think a July, because the PM was asked about a July election and didn't
rule it out. It's true.
I don't know. I'd like to get it out of the way. I just think, it's like...
It's because you want to go on your holidays in September.
But it's like ripping off a plaster.
I know.
You just need to get on with it now.
I know. I'm with you, Liv. I think it'll be later on in the year. Now, the Prime Minister has said the Rwanda deterrent is already working, as many asylum seekers are worried about coming here, he says.
Yeah, it comes after the recent influx of migrants crossing the border from Northern Ireland into the Republic. Government figures indicate there are 1,758 people who sought asylum in Ireland who are without an offer of state accommodation.
Well, Ireland's Foreign Minister, Micheál Martin, has connected Britain's controversial Rwanda policy to their failure to control migration after Brexit.
Let's head to Belfast. Doogie Beattie is there for us this morning. I mean, clearly, the concern over this in Ireland is building up momentum, isn't it?
Well, Stephen, I'm actually in Newtown, Mount Kenny, in the Republic of Ireland, in the beautiful Wicklow Mountains in behind me, and it was here during this week that relations have really broken down. Local people here really objecting, and you can see, I mean, this is a rural road, and if I just look at this is modern day Ireland. There is barriers across this road stopping people getting anything at all down access to this road. And if we look across this way here, we will see a GAA pitch. This is normally on a Sunday absolutely bung full of young people playing GAA. Now, there is an immigration centre due to open just down behind us here over the barrier, and for the last 6 or 7 weeks there have been protests here every single day. Now, earlier on in the week, that broke down as they tried to move people into this area, private security firms, escorted by the Garda Síochána, the police, the Irish police that's behind us. And what really did happen then was quite extraordinary. We had scenes of the riot squad, the Irish police riot squad, turning on Irish locals in this very quiet and picturesque area in order to enforce the policy of the government. And I spoke with Kevin Haig, who is a local representative here, and this is what he had to say to me.
And the proposal is to put 20 8-man tents onto the site to house 160 young men. We feel that's morally wrong. You can't just dump people in a field in Wicklow and expect things to go well. It's a very community-led protest, and right from the start we've kept it very non-political. We're not interested in right-wing politics. We're not interested in racism or anything like that. This is community people saying this is wrong for our community.
Now, you can hear them saying there they are not right-wing. This is as liberal and as beautiful a place as you could actually ever come across. I mean, there is no right-wing in Ireland. Ireland is one of the most liberal places you will ever come to. But over the past 5 years, there's over a million non-Irish registered in Ireland, and they have came here over the last years. And if that's only those that are registered. If you're here illegally, of course, you're not going to register. And we've been covering this for 2 years now, and it is really now coming to a head. And with local elections coming up, Stephen, and the European elections, this could really change the political map of Ireland.
OK, Doogie Beattie, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
7:15, let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom this morning.
And 2 men were arrested at a pro-Palestine protest in London yesterday. Police say one of the men was holding a placard with a swastika and the other made a racist remark towards counter-protesters. The event, which was organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, was calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
Humza Yousaf is asking leaders of rival parties to find common ground with the SNP as his leadership hangs in the balance. His spokesperson, though, has ruled out any sort of electoral pact with Alex Salmond's Alba party, a spokesperson dismissing the idea as fantasy. So Mr Yousaf is reaching out to those political opponents ahead of a no-confidence motion expected this week.
A gold pocket watch recovered from the body on the richest man on the Titanic has been sold at auction for a record-breaking £1,175,000. It had only been expected to fetch around £150,000. The previous highest amount paid for a Titanic artefact was £1.1 million for a violin played as the ship sank.
And the White House Correspondents' Dinner has wrapped up in Washington. Journalists and politicians were met by Palestinian protesters as they arrived. However, Joe Biden made the most of the situation, poking fun at Donald Trump.
Of course, the 2024 election is in full swing. And yes, age is an issue. I'm a grown man running against a 6-year-old. Well, Donald has had a few tough days lately. You might call it stormy weather. What the hell?
I have to say, the Correspondents' Dinner in the States is legendary because it's where the presidents have a lot of fun poked at them.
Do they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and they perform, do a little stand-up routine and all the rest of it. Donald Trump was the only president in I don't know how long who refused to have one. Well, it happened, he refused to turn up.
Oh.
So, because it's sort of organised by somebody else and they're the guest of honour.
Oh, I see.
But Donald Trump would never go. Though he went to other people's. I think he went to Obama's, one of Obama's ones, and Trump was in the audience. But he wouldn't go to his own. I think you've got to be a little bit more thick-skinned than that. Be prepared to have the Mickey taken out of you a little bit. It's good. It's good for the soul.
Biden certainly made the best of his situation, or the most of it, at least.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what people said about him and the sort of longer clips and things.
Yeah.
Because there will have been some jibes about him.
Well,
It's all part of the
absolutely.
fun. It's like a roast. Yeah. They call it a roast in the States.
It's a very American thing, isn't it? Yes. Do keep those views coming in on anything that we're talking about today. gbnews.com/yoursay. Should we take a look at the weather now?
Oh, let's. Here's Marco.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update for the Met Office for GB News. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across the UK today. Rain at times towards the east, generally a bit brighter the further west you go, but temperatures still struggling for the time of year. Confirmation then of a pretty wet picture across some central and many eastern parts of England. Towards the southeast we could see skies brightening briefly, but this could set off some pretty heavy, potentially even thundery showers for a time. Whereas towards the west and northwest are generally bright today here, but again notice a few showers dotted around as we go through the day. Temperatures really struggling under the rain towards the east, coupled with quite a strong northerly breeze, no better than 9 or 10 degrees in places here, whereas in the best of the sunshine further west we'll see highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. As we go through the evening into the overnight period, those outbreaks of rain will push away to the northeast, affecting the Northern Isles into the early hours of Monday. Elsewhere it will turn clearer for a time, but notice further showers gathering out towards the west, some of those starting to merge to longer spells of rain towards the morning. And other clear spells out towards the east, it will turn quite chilly. Could see a local frost by Monday morning in 1 or 2 spots, but generally those temperatures picking back up as these showers come back in across the west there. As for Monday, well, again, an east-west split developing in the weather, but this time a reversal of fortunes, with the east and southeast seeing the best of the dry and bright weather. Whereas out towards the west, there'll be plenty of showers around, those showers again merging at times to some longer spells of rain. And although pretty wet out towards the west, temperatures generally starting to pick up, with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius towards the north, up to 15 or 16 degrees in the southeast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now, some good news for you this morning. It's our biggest cash prize to date that we're giving away, a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash. It could all be yours in our latest Great British giveaway. That is enough cash to spend this summer in style. And here's how it could all be yours.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking? You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wind-up, is it? Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yeah, best of luck to you on that one. Still to come, is the government planning to send British troops to Gaza? We'll find out in a moment.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Here's an interesting one from you this morning from Bobby the Builder. Don't know if that's a real name. And he says, why do we allow our politicians to pick the date of the election? It's utter nonsense that a government can wait until it has the support it wants before it calls one. But a lot of people would agree with you, but we had fixed-term parliaments. Were they brought in 2010? And they ran for a couple of terms, and then they got rid of it. And I can't remember why they got rid of it again. There you go. But I mean, it's the old argument, isn't it? Because obviously whoever's in government is going to sort of time it to their best advantage. If there isn't a good time for this one for the Conservatives, it doesn't look like there is.
Well, Olivia Huntley was saying that Rishi Sunak may feel as though he wants to start to see things pan out well. So get those planes off to Rwanda, get those interest rates coming down, people feel a bit richer. Might be a game changer.
Do you think it would be, though?
I don't know.
I'm not.
But I think if you were Rishi Sunak, you'd want to give yourself the best shot, wouldn't you? You could see why you'd want to give it a little bit of time to see if it could. Because then at least he can say, look, the plan is there, it's working. You just got to give us a bit more time.
I just don't know if it's going to be enough. Is it to convince people? Well, let us know.
Yeah.
gbviews@gbnews.com on that one. But thanks, Bobby, for getting in touch on that one this morning.
Now, British troops could be deployed on the ground in Gaza to help deliver aid via a new sea route.
Yeah, the United States has said no American forces would go ashore and that an unnamed third party would drive trucks along a floating causeway onto the beach.
Well, the UK is understood to be considering tasking British troops with this when the aid corridor opens next month.
Whitehall sources have said no decision has been made as yet, and the MOD and the Israeli army have so far declined to comment.
Well, earlier we spoke with defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox.
It's the sort of thing that British troops ought to do, but we have the terrible cover, as it were, of the American argument that they won't put their troops in harm's way. And in this kind of operation, America has form. America held up going into Kosovo in 1999 because they were worried about force protection. There was very little opposition. It's very strange the way they operate. They're very well aware of force protection, by the way, in Afghanistan, and yet took huge amounts of casualties when they took over a hotspot like Sangin from British forces. Now, the wider aid operation, I think, is going to be a very important and always has been an important part of British forces. But I do understand the reticence of Whitehall, and particularly Number 10, in that they want cover and guarantees. I think, one, there must be a UN mandate, and I think the Israelis, Hamas and Islamic Jihad must be explained what the rules of engagement are. There is a potential of vulnerability from either side, but I think it can be done. But I think Britain would want to do it with an ally, and I would suspect that would be a Scandinavian and possibly France.
Well, couldn't you? I mean, why can't it be done on? And I don't know quite how these things work, Robert, but under the banner of UN peacekeeping.
I think that's exactly what it would be if they were blue helmets. We're only talking, I think, of a few hundred drivers. It's quite limited, but they are, as you rightly read in your. From your intro, that they're going on the beach. They are potentially in harm's way. But I'm finding this very, very difficult. Potentially, that's what happens to soldiers, people in the armed services. You don't expect to get killed or shot, but risk is inherent in it. And this is a very good thing. I think Lord Cameron will want this to happen because it gives Britain leverage. They really want to bring the whole Gaza, Rafah business to a conclusion within weeks. That's when they've really got to push the Israelis on that as well as Hamas, because they really want it wrapped up. And who wants it most of all? Joe Biden, because he doesn't want to go into a general election campaign. That is the election post the conventions for the presidency, with all this hanging around still. He's going to have Ukraine, and he's going to have Ukraine big time, and he's still got the Houthis, but he wants this one, I think, resolved. Whether he'll get it, I think it's about 50-50 at the moment.
Robert Fox there for you. Now, still to come, Ada McGee's going to have all the latest sports news, including Bus Stop with Mo Salah.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast at 7:33. Adrian McGee is with us now to talk us through all of the sport and the North London derby today.
Oh, what a huge game. 2 o'clock at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Now, Arsenal don't historically travel very well there, but they did win there 2-0 last season. The bookies make them slight favourites as well. Now, it's not just any North London derby, and I should say at this point that that's the one derby in the top 6 calendar which has never really disappointed in the 30 years.
It's the one that matters, Adrian.
Well, it does matter. I mean, lots of them matter. You can make a case for lots of different derbies all around the world, but this is the one that produces decent games, because what happens with other derbies is that because there's so much at stake, often the sides, the players just clam up a little bit. Sometimes the nerves get to the crowds as well. But with the North London derby, they tend to really go at each other, and we've seen some spectacular matches down the years. Given what's on this one today, I'm not taking for granted that we'll get a brilliant game, but nonetheless, Arsenal have huge ambition or huge incentive to try and stay ahead of Manchester City, albeit Manchester City have a game in hand. Tottenham have their own ambitions as well. I mean, Aston Villa losing their lead yesterday and just getting a point against Chelsea just derailed them slightly, opened the door to Tottenham to get that 4th place, which they've been striving for all season. And that's the end game for them. If they got the top 4 place and into the Champions League, that would be a huge season for Ange Postecoglou. And look, there's all the spice that goes into this match. Mikel Arteta has even been contacting Arsene Wenger, the last person to win a Premier League title for Arsenal back in 2004, to get a little bit of advice and to just get a little bit of a know-how to help Arsenal over the line, and also to help them in this fixture, because Arsene Wenger had a very good record in this game.
I had a request from Cockney Stamps.
You have. You're going to have to do it.
Come on, you Spurs. So big game today. Come on, Ellie. Give us a come on, you Spurs.
But you are a Spurs fan, aren't you?
Sorry?
You are a bit of a Spurs fan, aren't you?
Yes. So I'm going to have to time my nap today.
I should mention as well, we didn't mention last hour, Harry Kane in Germany got his 400th career goal yesterday, 42.
Oh, he's very good, isn't he?
The best striker in the world, bar none.
Really?
Yeah, extraordinary.
Right, let's have a look at Mo Salah and Jurgen Klopp, who've had a big falling out.
They have. I mean, look, bust up to me is sort of fisticuffs, isn't it? We didn't see any of that, but
More like Cold War tension.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, that's the phrase I was at. Yeah, that's
exactly what you were looking for. Yeah.
I know. For the radio listeners, you can see the picture there.
Oh, got it again.
We can see the picture there on screen. That's Jurgen Klopp. Now they've suffered a bit of a tumultuous few weeks, haven't they? They looked 2 weeks ago when they were playing Crystal Palace at home as if they were going to be part of this 3-way tussle for the top of the Premier League. The word triumvirate was used week after week by myself and nobody else. But they've fallen away. They lost at home to Crystal Palace. They went out of the Europa League. And yesterday they had one last chance to just keep on the coattails of Arsenal and Manchester City, and they blew it, quite frankly. They went 2-1 up at West Ham, a fixture they tend to do quite well in, and they just conceded a goal. Mo Salah was dropped at the start of the game. I mean, this is a guy who's scored, I've got the numbers down here, 210 goals in 346 appearances. He has every right to feel aggrieved at not being in that starting lineup, although he hasn't been playing well the last few days. And I guess Jurgen Klopp wanted to make a statement that nobody is above reproach when it comes to, if you're performing below par, you're going to sit on the bench. So he came on. Jurgen Klopp kind of said something to him. Salah appeared to take umbrage. He went back and said something else, pointing his finger at them. And then afterwards in the mix zone, which is the area where the journalists get to speak to the players, my source in the mix zone said to me that Mo Salah walked past them, and actually this has been reported quite widely now, but he turned back and said, if I speak, about this, there will be fire. I mean, that's not the kind of language you hear from top players these days because the scrutiny is on these guys so much. That's a purely emotional response. They think more now about what they say. They have media training for that purpose, Stephen, because they have to be very considered about what they say in the media because everything is blown up out of all proportion. And that was a very pointed statement. We know that Jurgen Klopp is leaving, and it's not been a very encouraging end to his reign, which is a shame because he's done brilliantly there in the 8.5, 9 years that he's been there. Mo Salah, I think, drifting into the last year of his contract, is the last opportunity this summer for Liverpool to get some money for him. I think we're going to see him end up in Saudi.
Yeah. Just to clarify, I guess I do not do any media training, especially not with footballers. No. So obviously Klopp's on his way out. We know that.
Yeah.
Ten Hag, is yesterday sealed the deal for him? Do we?
Well, 1-1 at home to Burnley. That's pretty poor. They are meant to be going for Europe here. It's not like the season is petering out, but they've got to cling on to a European place if they possibly can. But I mean, look, you're not a football fan, neither of you. But
how dare you? How dare you?
I love hospitality.
You love hospitality. I'm quite partial to a bit of hospitality, I must admit. But no, look, this is comical alley yesterday. I mean, look, you draw at home to Burnley. You could see the goal 3 minutes from time. What do you want your managers to say? You want someone to blame. You want to find out what he's going to do about it. What's going to happen in the next game? Who's going to be dropped? But instead, he says we are one of the most dynamic and entertaining teams in the league at the moment.
Well, it doesn't matter if you're not scoring the goals.
Well, he's saying that there have been 38 goals in the last eight games. That's including the opposition as well. So yes, I get his point. It is entertaining, but ask anyone who's been to Old Trafford this season. There's not been much entertainment there. They've been very poor. Very poor.
They'd rather not be entertained, but still win, wouldn't they?
Well, I don't know. It's interesting because you look at West Ham, for example. They win more games than they lose, or they certainly get more points than they have had in various times in their history. And they're in the top 8 at the moment, but the fans are cheesed off because they think the football's boring. So. You know, you're not pleasing these football fans, is there?
No, there isn't. There isn't. Let's have a look at Trump, should we?
Not that one.
Not that one.
No.
Judge.
Well, this is interesting because the World Snooker Championship is underway at the moment. Ronnie O'Sullivan in action against Ryan Day at 1 p.m. later on at the Crucible. But Judd Trump has revealed, a former world champion himself, of course, he revealed that he has been approached to enter into a breakaway snooker league. Now, what we don't know is whether this is from Saudi. I would imagine, against anything, I'll risk my bottom dollar on it, that it would be a Saudi-backed proposition. He said, not interested. He's done a Rory McIlroy.
Yeah.
Not interested, not going there. I don't want to play exhibitions. I want to play world title events and compete for the biggest prizes. Now, if they come back with a bigger sum of money, Judd Trump famously said he's more interested in money than he is in titles, which is understandable, you know. No, why not? It makes the world go round, doesn't it? This that stuff that we could do that with our hands.
Well, yeah. Well, we shall see on that. It'd be interesting to see if he did change his mind.
Well, he did. I mean, look, we said last week. We understand that snooker are thinking of taking away the world title the world championships away from the Crucible, which suggests it could go around the world. And I wonder whether they said that, Eddie Hearn, in response to learning of this development, because if the players start getting tempted, as they have in golf and as they possibly might do in tennis, then that blows away the whole thing. And maybe Eddie Hearn was just second-guessing what was going to happen further down the line and maybe preventing the problem before it becomes a bigger problem for them.
Perhaps.
Maybe.
Aidan, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much indeed. Still to come, do stay with us. We're going to be looking through the papers with Stephanie Tecci and Andy Jones. That's next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So interestingly, Harry listed the dates on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me.
Okay.
Are we just putting 2 and 2 together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, insulted our family in your book's best. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie. And there was, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property. And she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only a mere 8 bedrooms.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May...
The people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Welcome back to Breakfast. We're going to be going through the papers now with Stephanie Tetchy and Andy Jones. Very good morning to you both. And Andy, should we start with the infected blood scandal? It's on the front page of the Observer today.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that this is getting a lot of momentum. This was on the front page,
finally.
the front page of the Sunday Times last week, getting dozens of MPs to sign up to a proper inquiry, proper apology, proper compensation for victims of the infected blood scandal. And the Observer have done another story today discussing the basis of where this blood scandal came from, and also who knew what and when. So the infected blood scandal is centred on haemophiliacs who were unknowingly given in the 70s and 80s this blood product derived from America, which subsequently gave them, in some cases, HIV, hepatitis C. Other stories, a lady talking to the BBC recently was saying that she went into hospital after giving birth. She was given a blood transfusion and she basically woke up with hepatitis C and all these other illnesses, and the life-limiting impact on her, severe illness afterwards, the stigma of having hepatitis, people you got hepatitis C and people thinking you're a drug addict or you have lots of illicit sex or something like that. The Observer talk about the basis of where this story came from, where in America, across several states, they were basically farming blood from convicted convicts and giving them money and various other people money for the blood samples and giving lots of plasma so they could create these products for haemophiliacs. But there was no check and care as to whether or not these convicts had these awful illnesses, etc. And, of course, if you take one, and this is the true horror of it, if you take one blood sample from one person who's got HIV and then mix it with all of these other samples, the whole sample then has it. And then these are given to children in the UK in the 70s, 80s. These are given to patients who went in for entirely normal conditions and then left with these awful, awful cases. And they spoke to an American doctor who said as early as 1975 he was warning the American government and by proxy the British government who would have known. And it was sort of, we're taking blood in this way. It's been used in medicines. It's used in transfusions in the UK. Why aren't we doing something about it? So there's going to be almost a post office-style inquiry of who knew what and when, who got away with it, who made money out of it, and how many people are affected. And it's impacted people still to this day who are living with life-limiting conditions. They've lost parents, they've lost loved ones, they've lost children. No answers, no apologies, no compensation.
It's horrific.
No pun intended, it actually makes my blood boil, and it just is quite sickening, actually. And I just think it's really shocking how this has not been brought to light or not really looked into almost, 50 years later, and knowing that people have now had this lifelong sentence. It's really a miscarriage of justice here, and it's just sad. I think I've heard that ITV are planning to do a series on this, actually, so it will get further attention, but it's just sad that it takes it to either come on TV for these things to be really brought into the public's attention, and also just more for the victims getting the justice they deserve.
Yeah,
It's just absolutely horrific.
What's this in the Telegraph, Stephanie, about Prince Harry?
Well, he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. So he was presenting a military award, and he wore all of his medals except his coronation medal, which was given to him by his father for his for everyone who contributed as a way of support to the king. So you can imagine the media are having a field day saying that he's snubbing his father, and I don't think that is actually the case.
No.
Because a mountain expert has said that more than likely in America, where he is, in California, he wouldn't have been able to get the right ribbons to get this coronation medal mounted in time, and it would have looked scruffy. So I don't think it was him actually snubbing. And even if you look in the picture, his one side of his blazer's all filled with medals, and I don't think he
wouldn't have had space.
Yeah,
well, they can make them fit. The only thing I would say is coronation medals and things like that, and Jubilee medals are, if you've got proper medals, as it were.
Yeah, operational medals. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not considered proper medals.
Yeah.
And so a lot of soldiers wouldn't wear it on their
Okay.
thing.
Oh, see, that's good to know. But the way the media will paint it in the newspapers is that he is snubbing his father. And sometimes I think with this kind of fallout with Harry and the royal family, it's just been made worse by such of these reports. You know, do we really know that Harry was trying to snub his father by not wearing a medal?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, especially exactly what the king is going through at the moment. Like, these are not the kind of stories we should be having in the papers.
No, it's not. It's not overly helpful, and as I say, it may be that, because it's not operational, you might just not wear it.
Should we move swiftly on then?
Yes.
Oh, should we?
Andy, should we look at the Telegraph Online and Columbia University?
Yeah, so Columbia University, one of America's most prestigious universities, there's currently a sit-in protest encampment on the grounds which is essentially pro-Palestine students setting up an encampment in protest against the war in Gaza, which, I support peaceful protest, but they're stopping Jews entering the campus. There's an issue where a Jewish professor, Jewish lecturer hasn't been able to enter the campus. There's a lot of anti-Semitism there, and there's been a rant where an individual in a black balaclava, they're always so proud of their protest, but they always cover their faces, these people always notice, was shouting about Jews, and security guards who were supposed to be guarding the entrance were unmoved and didn't get involved. So it's again the situation where people are saying horrendously anti-Semitic things, and the security who were supposed to be intervening in this, private security in this case rather than police, they're not doing anything about it. But one of the leaders of this protest on Columbia University has also been apparently said sort of anti-white things in the past. He talks about intifada, killing of Zionists is absolutely fine, and it's a position where it goes far over, and I support peaceful protests, I support these people having a right of protest, but it goes far over the line into sort of, they're basically just attacking anyone who's Jewish. And it comes from a place of ignorance. There's incredible footage on this Columbia University protest where they ask people, what are you protesting about? And they can't even explain. They say, oh, yeah, we're just protesting because somebody else was protesting, and it's just all because of all the bad stuff happening in the Middle East. And it's like, well, you don't even know why you're there.
No.
And they're asked whether they know what intifada means, and they're just like, I've no idea. And they're shouting intifada, and they've got no idea what it means. And these are supposed to be America's youngest, brightest and best. And the level of ignorance is astonishing.
This is what happens, and what I never understand with these people who then... You often see it on Twitter, actually, don't you, with these people who claim... You look at their profile, they're all about love and peace and understanding, and we all need to be kinder to one another. And they're the people who spouting the most bile on there.
Well, this is what goes over my head with these protests, because I'm all up for peaceful protests, and I think people should have the right to protest about issues they care about. But the problem is, you're not protesting correctly if you're spreading hate. You're doing the exact thing which you're trying to eliminate, and it just doesn't make sense. And I think that's been the sad thing about this war, how it's trickled down into society and really made it against, pro-Palestine, against, you know, Jewish people, and it doesn't need to be that way. You know, you can protest but still be respectful of people's faiths.
Right, Stephanie, let's have a look at something totally different because we need to have something a bit lighter this morning.
Yeah.
And Tim Peake, our astronaut, is talking about life on millions of planets across the universe.
He believes, he's quite a respected astronaut, he believes that aliens do exist. He spent up to 185 days in space, and he says there is seeds of life everywhere. ET life, extraterrestrial life. He says, look, there's 200 billion stars, 2 trillion galaxies, and to think that human beings are the only form of life in this whole, all the different planets, he says it's a bit preposterous in that sense. And I do kind of agree with him. I think...
Yes, of course.
We always think... I think the problem here, what he says in the article, is, like, people think of Hollywood's version of aliens, where actually, no, it doesn't have to be a little green monster. Aliens can exist in different forms. But it did get me thinking, you know, who actually drew the first alien and came up with the concept of alien? It seems very hidden.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess the issue with aliens is because they're played in dramas and things, and before CGI and all that existed, they had to be bipedal humanoid because that's what the actors were who played them.
Yes.
Tell I've been watching too much Star Trek, can't you?
Well, no, quite. And also...
carbon-based life forms.
And it'd probably be less interesting if alien life forms were, as Tim Peake is saying, some sort of benign parasite that just sort of floats around. You can't really make a 3-hour action thriller out of that. So, yeah, I mean, again, if the universe is infinite, then we cannot definitively say that there is nothing else out there.
No, well, it's basic statistics. So
Ellie, do you believe in aliens?
I'm not sure.
Oh, are you?
I'm not sure. I like to think there's something else out there.
Yeah.
There's got to be, hasn't there?
There's got to be. Well, they've discovered now that planet, haven't they? What's 175 light years away or something, which the James Webb Telescope has discovered, and it's got gases in the atmosphere which they say can only be emitted by life forms, by sort of metabolising things. But it's probably just like plankton or something.
Aliens passing gas, who knows?
Well, exactly. Exactly, but that's a long...
Their planets are probably way more cooler and peaceful than our planet. No cost of living crisis, no health problems.
Yeah. Imagine if there's a perfect universe out there.
I know.
How many of our problems?
We've got the short stick.
Yeah.
Well, very possibly.
Yeah.
Very possibly. All right, you two. Been good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, just on that, Adrian Porter says, why haven't aliens come to Earth? Because it's a very long way away.
They might be en route.
Might be.
Who knows?
A very long time.
Why would you be here?
All right, look, we're back in a moment, but first, here's your weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update for the Met Office for GB News. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across the UK today. Rain at times towards the east, generally a bit brighter the further west you go, but temperatures still struggling for the time of year. Confirmation then of a pretty wet picture across some central and many eastern parts of England. Towards the southeast we could see skies brightening briefly, but this could set off some pretty heavy, potentially even thundery showers for a time. Whereas towards the west and northwest are generally bright today here, but again notice a few showers dotted around as we go through the day. Temperatures really struggling under the rain towards the east, coupled with quite a strong northerly breeze, no better than 9 or 10 degrees in places here, whereas in the best of the sunshine further west we'll see highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. As we go through the evening into the overnight period, those outbreaks of rain will push away to the northeast, affecting the Northern Isles into the early hours of Monday. Elsewhere it will turn clearer for a time, but notice further showers gathering out towards the west, some of those starting to merge to longer spells of rain towards the morning. And other clear spells out towards the east, it will turn quite chilly. Could see a local frost by Monday morning in 1 or 2 spots, but generally those temperatures picking back up as these showers come back in across the west there. As for Monday, well, again, an east-west split developing in the weather, but this time a reversal of fortunes, with the east and southeast seeing the best of the dry and bright weather. Whereas out towards the west, there'll be plenty of showers around, those showers again merging at times to some longer spells of rain. And although pretty wet out towards the west, temperatures generally starting to pick up, with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius towards the north, up to 15 or 16 degrees in the southeast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've
blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good morning. 8 o'clock, Sunday the 28th of April. Today, Tory rebels plotting to oust the Prime Minister following Dan Poulter's defection to Labour.
Is the Rwanda plan already working? Well, the Prime Minister thinks so, as he says migrants heading to Ireland shows that the scheme is a deterrent.
But in Ireland, anger brewing over the government's approach to housing asylum seekers, with protests planned for today.
I'm in the beautiful Wicklow village of Newtown, Butler, Kennedy, that has found itself right at the front of Ireland's immigration row.
A dangerous escalation or essential to deliver aid? The government considers deploying British troops on the ground in Gaza.
Good morning. A huge weekend of Premier League action continues today as Tottenham host bitter rivals Arsenal this afternoon in the North London derby. We'll hear about a bust-up between Jurgen Klopp and Mo Salah. Everton stayed up, Sheffield United went down, and Rafa Nadal rolls back the years in Madrid. More later.
Hello, good morning. We'll see an east-west split in our weather today across the UK. Rain at times in the east, generally a little bit brighter the further west you go. I'll have all the details later.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Perhaps. Alan Coleman's been in touch saying...
Morning, Alan.
Saying, this isn't the question for you, but I'll do that one next. First of all, Alan says, aliens won't come to Earth because based on trip reviews, we only have 1 star. Very good.
Oh, very good. Very good.
And Adrian has a question. They say they have aliens in Area 51 in the US. Does this place still exist and are there aliens?
Does Area 51 still exist? I don't know.
OK, that was very good.
Yes, don't know. It's, I think, well, it's still there, but whether it is actually housing anything secret or not, it's still all guarded off, I think, so you can't get to it.
It is, yes.
But is it really full of all alien tech and secret stuff? And probably. You can't get near it. It's all barricaded off and things, and warnings, you will be shot if you cross this line and all that sort of thing. So there's got to be something there.
It's mystery.
Something there. Whether aliens definitely exist.
Well, yes, you certainly think so.
Yeah, but
they're probably very boring, like plankton.
No, not
or they're a
necessarily.
very, 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 very long way away.
Well, yeah, they'd have to be incredibly intelligent to be able... People say, well, why aren't they here? Well, because even to get to this planet we're talking about, which is 175 light years away, it would take millions of years for us to travel at the fastest speed we can do now. It would take millions of years to get there.
So they could be en route.
So they could. So you need someone who's developed a way to do what they call FTL travel, faster than light travel, which would be wormholes and things like that, which we can't create at the moment stably.
Any space questions? Send them in, Stephen.
Have your eyes glazed over yet?
No, I find it fascinating.
Do you really?
Yeah, but you're really into this. So any questions, send them in. I'll read them out to Stephen.
It's all the sci-fi thing. You know, like people going about wormholes. It's in all the sci-fi stuff about wormholes. But that's real. It's real about actually getting wormholes, which connects 2 points of space-time, so you can jump vast distances in no time at all.
So they are real?
Oh, they are real, but what they can't do is we can't generate enough energy to produce one, and if you do produce one, they don't think they can make it stable.
Oh, well, you don't want to risk it then, do you?
At this stage. But they know it's a real thing. It is a real thing.
Yeah. There you go. Every day's a school day.
Oh, it's all very exciting, you know, if you get into this side of stuff.
John Allen says, aliens will take one look at this planet, and if they have any sense, they will move on and not bother. KG says, why would you want to come here? We are bonkers, or the world is bonkers. And Adrian says, great show as normal. Good morning.
Oh, thank
I'm
you.
glad that you're matching well in your clothes. You look very smart.
Oh, excellent. We try our best. No, I tell you what, though, aliens wouldn't be interested in us at the moment because we're too basic, too... what's the word?
We're not clever enough, not sophisticated enough.
Yes.
Not...
I can't think of the word I'm looking for. We're not developed enough.
OK.
We'd be too...
Simple.
Yes. It's so simple, I can't even think of the word I want.
Oh, you've got loads of questions.
That's what's happening.
You've got loads of questions coming in. Would Stephen like to travel to the space station?
Oh, yes.
Stephen, how do you know we are not the aliens?
Well, we are aliens to other... we are. We are aliens to other planets out there. We are the aliens.
Yeah, so the answer to that is we are aliens, yes.
Yes.
Keep the space questions coming in for Stephen. It's quite fun.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
I feel like we should mic you up and put you on stage.
Tell you what, me and Brian Cox, he knows
Is he your hero?
He knows a little bit more than I do. Yeah, Brian Cox, I think, is amazing. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who I have had the pleasure of interviewing once, who is just phenomenal. You won't know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is.
No. Yeah.
I've got a lot of educating to do here.
Yes, you do.
Anyway.
Fred just said, how is Ellie keeping a straight face? I'm not. I'm failing. Spectacularly, as per usual. Anyway, should we do some work?
We should do, before my voice goes entirely. Let's talk about Tory rebels, should we, who are on a warpath following the defection of Tory MP Dan Poulter to the Labour Party.
Well, according to The Telegraph, a group of Tory MPs are working on a 100-day roadmap to turn around their election chances, which involves a new policy blitz and installing Penny Mordaunt as Prime Minister.
Yeah, whether she wants it or not, it sounds like. It follows the defection of the Central Suffolk and North Ipswich MP, Dr Dan Poulter, yesterday. He's a former health minister who works part-time as a mental health doctor.
Well, joining us now, live in the studio, is GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley. Very good to see you, Olivia. And just how damaging is Dan Poulter's defection?
Well, it is a pretty huge blow for the Prime Minister. Dan Poulter actually has a really safe Conservative seat. He has a majority of something like 23,000 in Ipswich and Suffolk. the Prime Minister does not want to be losing MPs like that, particularly one with Dan Poulter's history as a doctor and still currently as a mental health doctor. Poulter has also made this more difficult for Rishi Sunak by writing a huge op-ed in The Guardian today saying that, that the Conservative Party can't be trusted with the NHS and only Labour can be trusted. And of course, apart from the blow of losing this experienced MP, he became an MP in 2010, it has also got all of the plotters talking. In the Telegraph today, there's this huge piece about a group of plotters who are now saying that they have 100 days to save the country and the Conservative Party. What they're doing at the moment is trying to round up backbenchers to row behind Penny Mordaunt, who they would like to see installed as Prime Minister before the next election.
It's interesting. I don't know if you had a chance to look at what they would like to do, but is it anything new? Is it anything radical?
Well, what they want to do is massively cut taxes. That's their sort of number one pledge. I mean, we can totally see the logic in that. We do have the highest tax burden for sort of 70 years, and there are plenty of both Conservative voters and Conservative MPs worried that, you know, the problem is that unless you have a very different offer from Labour, people just won't come out and vote Conservative. A way to get some clear blue water between the Conservatives and Labour is to massively, massively lower taxes. There are Conservatives who feel like Jeremy Hunt's recent budgets have just been sort of tinkering round the edges. So that's what they want to do. But of course, it's easier said than done, as we saw with Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget in 2022. Radically, drastically and suddenly cutting taxes comes with all of its own problems. So all of this feels a little bit ideological, a bit theoretical. It's very hard to see it actually sort of coming to fruition as a plan.
What do you think about Penny Mordaunt in all of this? Do you think she'd even want to be the leader of the Tory party, considering what the polls are suggesting?
I mean, if I were in her position, I personally wouldn't want to be leader of the Conservative Party, but she has wanted this job for a really long time. She obviously was fought in the last leadership election. She has a group of about 70 MPs who really, really want her in the job. And from the sounds of it, she's been doing the rounds of Westminster, you know, weekly, trying to garner up some more support. So it does sound as though she wants the job. She has a really small majority, so she's at risk of losing her seat in the next election either way. So for her, there's not really too much to lose. If she becomes leader and then loses her seat, it would be bad for the Conservative Party, but obviously it would be bad for her if she's not leader and she loses her seat. This is her last chance, she thinks, to try and take that mantle. So that's where she's sitting in all of this. But whether the rebels can make the numbers up to have a vote of no confidence, and then whether Rishi Sunak would actually stand down, because not many people think that he would actually lose that vote of no confidence. The idea is that he would just stand down because it's the right thing to do. I'm not so convinced that he would. I think he wants to hold on until that election, come what may.
Do these people have their blinkers on? I mean, in the sense that for anyone else right across the country looking at this, if there was a Tory rebellion and a sort of decapitation, if you like, at the top, and then another Prime Minister inserted who, again, hasn't been elected, you know, is just all thrown in just before an election, well, I mean, you can only imagine, actually, the numbers who in the polls for the Labour Party would just go up, wouldn't they? And reform.
Oh, well, quite possibly. The calculation from Conservative Party rebels at the moment is basically that things can't get any worse for the Conservative Party. They are languishing so far behind in the polls that it looks as though they might only get sort of 100 seats or so. It could be a worse defeat than in 1997. So these rebels probably don't think that they're going to, you know, row into a spectacular victory with Penny Mordaunt at their head, but they do think maybe it's worth that just final desperate throw of the dice to try and avoid unmitigated disaster.
OK. Olivia Attlee, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, let us know what you think about that one. It just seems so desperate, doesn't it? But maybe they are desperate.
Could it change things, though? Would it be enough? Let us know what you think.
Yeah, would it force you either side to reform and to Labour, depending on quite where you sit on the spectrum? With all that one, I mean, it's fascinating. It all just seems to be falling apart.
It does, falling apart at the seams.
Right, let's head to Ireland now, where a recent influx of migrants crossing the border from Northern Ireland into the Republic has sparked protests from the locals.
Yes, latest government figures indicate there are 1,758 people who have sought asylum in Ireland who are without an offer of state accommodation.
Well, Ireland's Foreign Minister, Micheál Martin, has connected Britain's controversial Rwanda policy to their failure to control migration after Brexit.
Well, let's speak to Doogie Beattie, who is live for us now. Good to see you this morning, Doogie. And anger is brewing, isn't it, in the Republic of Ireland over the immigration policy?
Well, good morning and welcome to Newtown Butler, Kennedy. This is one of the most picturesque villages you will come across. If you just look there behind us, it's like something out of Balamory. It is an absolutely beautiful place in the Wicklow Mountains, and this is as liberal as it gets. I mean, we have been reporting this for about 2 years in the Republic of Ireland, and most of these immigrants were being pushed into working class areas. Now they have decided to put them into these areas, and just about 3 miles away from here there is a old convent, a boys' home as it was, and the locals had asked for that boys' home to be used for the community for years and were denied it. Now what's happened is they have decided to put a lot of young men immigrants into those homes, and the surprising thing on this is this was the first time that the riot squad, the Garda Síochána's public order unit, decided that they would go in with riot shields and pepper spray and actually put it up to the locals here that it was going to happen one way or the other. Now, what that has done is actually caused real anger in amongst those that would have formerly been liberals in Ireland and pushed them more towards the hard line that is really starting to show its teeth here now in Ireland, because over the last 10 years we have seen an increase in 1 million people into the Republic of Ireland. It only had a population of 3.7 million. It's now over 5 million, and they are only people that are saying that they have registered to come here. Those that have came here illegally, of course, don't register. And I spoke to Kevin Haig last night at the barricades to find out what the locals thought.
And the proposal is to put 20 8-man tents onto the site to house 160 young men. We feel that's morally wrong. You can't just dump people in a field in Wicklow and expect things to go well. It's a very community-led protest, and right from the start we've kept it very non-political. We're not interested in right-wing politics. We're not interested in racism or anything like that. This is community people saying this is wrong for our community.
Well, you can hear in that the disbelief in these people that would have been very, very liberal and very much part of the state, and they cannot understand, because Ireland has an opt-out clause the same as the Netherlands, where they don't have to take as many migrants, and they can't understand why that is happening. And most of all, they're looking at how non-contributory welfare and education is driving these people from the UK into here. And of course, we have been saying about this for the last couple of years, where the common travel area between Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England is very much in use, and that may have to be looked at again to stop this happening.
OK, Doogie, thanks very much indeed.
Now, at 8:15, let's take a look at some other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
2 men have been arrested at a pro-Palestine march in London yesterday. One of the men, according to police, was holding a placard with a swastika. The other allegedly made racist remarks towards counter-protesters. The event was organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign and was calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
Humza Yousaf is asking leaders of rival parties to find common ground with the SNP as his leadership hangs in the balance. However, his spokesperson has ruled out any sort of pact with Alex Salmond's Alba party, with the spokesperson dismissing this idea as fantasy. It comes as Mr Yousaf reaches out to political opponents ahead of a no-confidence motion expected this week after he ejected the Greens from his government.
A gold pocket watch recovered from the body of the richest man on board the Titanic has been sold at auction for £1,175,000. Now, originally the estimate was only £150,000. It's the highest amount paid for a Titanic artefact since the violin that was being played as the ship sank sold for £1.1 million.
And the White House Correspondents' Dinner in the US has wrapped up in Washington, D.C. Upon arrival, journalists and politicians were met by pro-Palestinian protesters. However, President Biden made the most of the situation at dinner, poking fun at his predecessor and presidential opponent, Donald Trump.
The 2024 election is in full swing. And yes, age is an issue. I'm a grown man running against a 6-year-old. Well, Donald's had a few tough days lately. You might call it stormy weather. What the hell?
Yeah, and apparently, though, he was having a dig there. Apparently, lots of people were having a dig at Joe Biden. It is a roast, that sort of thing.
Very American thing.
And Colin Jost. Do you know Colin Jost? He's on Saturday Night Live and things. He's actually very funny. He's married to Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Anyway, he was apparently hosting some of it and was making comments about Biden's age and things like that. So
that is to be expected.
You do go there as a president to have the mickey taken out of you a little bit.
Well, good on him, in a sense, for facing up to it and
yeah, they've all done
taking it on the chin.
Apart from Donald Trump, who never turned up to one. He's a bit thin-skinned when it comes to things like that.
Yeah.
There you go. I think you've just got to go with the flow, haven't you?
Yeah, got to try to at least. Anyway, lots of you getting in touch on aliens. Nigel says, of course we are aliens. Women come from Venus and men come from Mars. After all, yeah.
Yes.
Ross says aliens...
Is that Germaine Greer who wrote that? Who wrote... No, who wrote the book?
Oh, I don't know.
I
thought you meant The View. No, I've got the book at home, so I should know that.
Have you? Yeah.
Ross says aliens came here and then turned back after seeing the ULEZ cameras in London. And Paul Farrow says if you want to see aliens, get the night bus home at the weekend. So thank you for all of those.
All very fair points.
Yes, do keep them coming in. gbnews.com/you'll say.
Right, let's have a look at the weather with Marco.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update for the Met Office for GB News. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across the UK today. Rain at times towards the east, generally a bit brighter the further west you go, but temperatures still struggling for the time of year. Confirmation then of a pretty wet picture across some central and many eastern parts of England. Towards the southeast we could see skies brightening briefly, but this could set off some pretty heavy, potentially even thundery showers for a time. Whereas towards the west and northwest are generally bright today here, but again notice a few showers dotted around as we go through the day. Temperatures really struggling under the rain towards the east, coupled with quite a strong northerly breeze, no better than 9 or 10 degrees in places here, whereas in the best of the sunshine further west we'll see highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. As we go through the evening into the overnight period, those outbreaks of rain will push away to the northeast, affecting the Northern Isles into the early hours of Monday. Elsewhere it will turn clearer for a time, but notice further showers gathering out towards the west, some of those starting to merge to longer spells of rain towards the morning. And other clear spells out towards the east, it will turn quite chilly. Could see a local frost by Monday morning in 1 or 2 spots, but generally those temperatures picking back up as these showers come back in across the west there. As for Monday, well, again an east-west split developing in the weather, but this time a reversal of fortunes, with the east and southeast seeing the best of the dry and bright weather. Whereas out towards the west there'll be plenty of showers around, those showers again merging at times to some longer spells of rain. And although pretty wet out towards the west, temperatures generally starting to pick up, with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius towards the north, up to 15 or 16 degrees in the southeast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
John Gray.
John Gray.
Apparently wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Germaine Greer, who messaged in about Germaine Greer? Simon Egan said she wrote The Female Eunuch. Yes, of course she did. At least she's famous, one of those books. Not that I've read it.
You're on the right track.
I mean, why would I read it? I don't know. Anyway, right now, summer is just around the corner, fingers crossed.
Well, we keep saying that, don't we? But here we are.
Anyway, we want to make it really sizzle for you with an incredible £20,000 in cash up for grabs in the brand new Great British Giveaway.
Yes, it's our biggest cash prize to date, and it could all be yours. Here's how you could be the winner.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, good luck indeed. Now, do stay with us. Still to come, we're going to be speaking to the hosts of hit podcast Insight. So there's so much smoke in here because...
Oh, so is there? Yeah, my son must be burning.
Yes. We're going to be talking to the podcast hosts behind a smash hit podcast. So I'll tell you a bit more after this.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Mark White was saying there, Sue, that he thinks it's getting worse, and you were nodding along to that. You've seen this over decades. Situation is sprawling along the coast, more people,
yes.
And the danger is ramping up.
Definitely, because the numbers and the money it's run like a military operation. I mean, I've been told that by the National Crime Agency, and I don't need to be told it by them to know it. It is meticulous because there's so much money involved. So they're marshalling migrants here, the gangs, they're controlling the gangs, and there will be a kingpin. You know, in some city far away in Erbil, or even in Paris, or in Brussels, who never goes anywhere near the beaches. It's like a Ponzi scheme, really.
Yeah. With that in mind, there's such vested interest, such money, such demand, a never-ending string of demand of people who want to come here.
People are already on their way, remember?
Yeah.
If we stop them now, they're already leaving. There's people leaving the Sudan now are going to reach the only place they want to get to, the French beaches, to get to the UK. They'll arrive in 2.5 years' time.
And so,
you see, they're on their way.
If it's that organised, that lucrative, that desirable, how on earth do we ever break that chain?
It sounds incredibly harsh, but I'm sure, I think if the EU change politically in the June elections, which I think it probably will,
yes,
I think they will put up, as the Greeks have done, holding camps all over Europe, the coasts of Europe, where people are assessed, just to see who is coming in, which would be a plus, as the Greeks have done, because we have no idea who is coming in.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Now, professional psychotherapists Helen Villiers and Katie McKenna have become the go-to experts on how to have a healthier relationship. It's all thanks to their smash hit podcast, Insight Exposing Narcissism.
Yeah, their life-changing advice has so far drawn a following of more than 1 million across social media platforms, and they've been, apparently, inundated with clients whose mental well-being has been affected by previous, often toxic relationships.
Well, we're delighted to say...
This could be us this morning, because we seem to be sat so far
I know,
apart.
it's very unlike us, actually. Well, I'm
it.
delighted to say that Helen and Katie join us now. So good to see you both. I recognise you both, actually, from social media, which just goes to show what a massive following you both must have. Helen, let's start with you. This is a smash hit podcast, 1 million followers across all your social medias. Why do you think it has been so popular?
Well, I think it's about the fact that so many people can relate to this, whether they are having a relationship with a parent or whether it's a relationship with a colleague or a friend, that a lot of people can relate to the idea of having toxic relationships. And so, yeah, I think the podcast is successful. And then, of course, we've got the book out now, which is making it even more accessible for more people.
Katie, let's start at the basic, at the very bottom with all of this. What is narcissism? We talk about it a lot. I wonder if we really understand what it is.
I think what's really important to remember is that we all have narcissistic traits, and it just depends what's healthy versus unhealthy. So healthy narcissism is what makes us get ahead, be ambitious, achieve things. Unhealthy narcissism is the complete opposite. That's where somebody will walk all over you, climb all over you to get ahead. They will use you, exploit you. They'll tell you that they have your best interests at heart, but they don't. And your feelings will be never taken into consideration because it's always about them. It always centers themselves.
And what is so interesting, Helen, is you are giving people that knowledge, because when you think about narcissism, you think about a romantic relationship often, don't you? You think about controlling relationships, but that's not necessarily the case. It could be in any relationship that you could see in your life, and it's about recognising those signs, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got it completely right. It's about knowing what is and or isn't healthy. And that most people do attribute this to the romantic relationship, but actually where we see it normally first is in the parent-child relationship. So that sort of lays the tracks for people to be vulnerable to that kind of behaviour in adulthood, because what we learn as normal in childhood is what we appreciate as normal in adulthood. So yeah, we see it in all sorts of relationships, but typically, if somebody has been exposed to it in an adult romantic relationship, it started in childhood. So, yeah.
But that's hugely disturbing, Katie, isn't it? The idea, the very point of parenthood is that you put your child first, and it would seem that it is, from your experience, quite common almost for parents to be focusing on themselves and not their children.
Yes, and it is so normalised in society. It can be so insidious. Children that are brought up in this environment think that this is healthy. The truth is that it is their normal, but it's not healthy. So when we think of these behaviours, this will be parents that will stonewall their children, so won't be interested in their lives. They will give the children the silent treatment. What we see with the narcissistic parent is we break them into 3 categories in our book, You're Not the Problem. And that's the critical parent. This is the parent that's not happy with anything and they're not afraid to say it. The ignoring parent, and that's the parent that does just that. They ignore their child, they're not interested in what they're doing, they won't show up at big occasions, they act as if they don't exist. And there's the engulfing parent that's the complete opposite to the ignoring parent. And this parent can be praised in society, but it's really unhealthy. This is the parent that smothers their child, hovers over their child, and wants to be involved in every single aspect of their life in a really unhealthy way.
And Helen, just hearing Katie describe that there, that must have such a detrimental impact on a person's well-being and mental health.
Oh, absolutely. The amount of mental health conditions that are created by growing up in this environment, where basically with the 3 types that Katie described, we see a complete oppression of somebody's autonomy, their sense of self, they don't know who they are. And then we see lots of course, depression, anxiety, but self-harm, eating disorders. Huge, huge impact. You're absolutely right.
Do narcissists know they're narcissists?
That's one of those questions that we get asked a lot, and it's a brilliant question because there's such a level of understanding to it. It's about whether or not they're self-aware. And so what we always say is they're aware enough to know that the behaviour shouldn't be exposed in front of other people, so they know enough to hide it, so they know it's wrong, but they're not aware enough to know why they do it, what the impact, or care even about the impact on other people. So there's an awareness, but not enough for them to want to change the behaviour, sadly.
Katie, for people who are watching and listening this morning and they think they might be in a relationship with a narcissist, whether that might be a boss or a parent or a romantic relationship, what advice would you give to them? How do they break that cycle?
That's a really good question. And one of the most important bits of advice I would give is actually to be able to recognize where this is coming from. So to recognize themselves in it. When you said there, the parent-child relationship, what we would see in these family systems is a golden child. And everybody would know a golden child. This is where the parent treats the child as if they're the son. They think that they're perfect. Of course they're not, but in the parent's eyes they are. We will see an invisible child. Again, this is the parent that just ignores that child, forgets them, acts as if they don't exist. We see the scapegoat in a family system like this, and that is the child that is blamed for absolutely everything that goes wrong in the family. And we would also see the gilded child. This is the child that can think that they're golden. They're often very close with their parent. They're enmeshed with their parent. They have to work very hard to keep this relationship with their parent, be their best friend. And they would have to work really hard at it. And it's only when they say no in that relationship that they can actually see the cracks where this behaviour is really, really toxic.
Do you know what? Well, in the last 4 minutes, and I've got to be honest, I'm not a big podcast listener, so I wasn't aware of your podcast. Within the last 4 minutes, I now want to tune in and listen because it's fascinating. It's a hugely fascinating area, isn't it? Because even if it doesn't apply to our own private lives, you can apply it to work, you can apply it to people that you know. It's absolutely fascinating.
No, it is.
Love it. Really good to talk to you both.
Thanks, Bert. And for people that aren't interested in the podcast, we've written a book. It's You're Not the Problem. So for people that aren't podcast listeners, that's available now.
And Helen, if people want to listen to the podcast, how do they find you?
Just go to the website, insightpodcast.com, and you will find all the links to everything that we do, all the resources, the book, everything else. And yeah, you can access everything there. insightpodcast.com.
Brilliant. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
I find that absolutely fascinating.
Well, it's good to have knowledge, isn't it? Because knowledge is power. Yeah. And I hadn't appreciated that you can get narcissistic relationships outside of a romantic one.
Ah, right.
I hadn't appreciated that.
Hadn't you?
No. Well, of course, it sounds quite obvious, doesn't it? But
yeah, well, it's like all these things. It sounds obvious when you discuss it.
Yes, but maybe we don't discuss it often enough.
It's that guide. And when they were talking about the three, Katie was talking about the 3 different types of narcissistic parenting. And you can see that, I have to say, not with mine. Thank heavens, I've been extremely lucky. But you can see other people that you went to school with or things whose parents have behaved in that way.
Yeah, families spring to mind, don't they, when you think about that?
It's absolutely fascinating.
No, it was really good conversation. Let us know what you thought about that as well. gbnews.com/yoursay. Do stay with us. Ada McGee is going to be joining us very shortly with all of the latest sports news.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May...
The people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Aidan's here with us to talk us through all the sport. Morning to you, Aidan.
Good morning to you both.
Should we talk about a big bust-up?
Yeah.
Or Cold War tension, however you'd like to put it.
Yeah, I know. Again, that wasn't... I've been trying to get my head around that one. I still can't see it myself.
No.
But there was certainly 2 fronts confronting each other on the sideline at the London Stadium yesterday. And it's all quite unedifying in all seriousness, Ellie, because... these are two people, rather, at Liverpool, who one's the manager, one is the star player, and they've enjoyed a wonderful relationship over a period of 6-7 years. In fact, you can argue that Jurgen Klopp rescued Mo Salah's career. He was drifting at Chelsea, he found some form at Basel, but there was no guarantee he was ever going to come back to top-level sport. You see a lot of players fall by the wayside. So I think the numbers speak for themselves. 210 goals in 346 appearances. Now, he got dropped yesterday because... he wasn't playing well, but you always know with Mo Salah, form is temporary, class is forever. You know that he's going to score goals, and I think that he was certainly irked by the fact that he was dropped. When Klopp brought him on in the 79th minute, they just conceded an equaliser against West Ham, so tensions were high. They can probably hear fans behind them chanting all kinds of obscenities, not labelling that on West Ham specifically. That's just what kind of happens. But there was some finger jabbing. Klopp certainly said something, and it didn't play out very well. And it's a shame because there's only a couple of games left in this season, and I hope they can mend things before the end of the season because it would be awful if they went out that way. Salah went through the mix zone afterwards and said that if I spoke about what went on, there would be fire, which is Mo Salah's not given to hyperbole, and so you sense that something is seriously wrong. Klopp, for his part, said, "Oh, it's all done and dusted," but that's what you'd expect a manager to say. So I hope they find a truce because they've been a joy to watch in the Premier League over a number of years, and we just hope it doesn't end this way.
Is Ten Hag done and dusted after that draw yesterday?
Well, I don't think the draw is necessarily done for him, Stephen, but it doesn't help. I mean, you're at home to Burnley, who are in the bottom 3, staring at relegation. They come away from Old Trafford, just down the road, with a point because your goalkeeper, who you spent a load of money on last summer, made a mistake that led to the penalty. And then Erik Ten Hag, who has suffered all season with trying to find consistency. Some of these players need shifting on, quite frankly. It's not easy to shift them on because when they're on great contracts at a place like Manchester United, they're not exactly going to take a pay cut and go somewhere else if they don't have to. So, anyway, at the end of the match yesterday, he comes out and says, this is the most entertaining side we've seen. They've got the actual direct quote here. He said, we are one of the most dynamic and entertaining teams in the league at the moment. I mean, you could have fooled me. I've been there a few times this season. They've been involved in some great games, but you want more from Manchester United. They are the biggest club in the world, and you expect them to see them at least in the Champions League places, and they are way off it at the moment. I think he'll go this summer.
Well, talking about dynamic games, should we talk about the North London derby?
Well, it never disappoints, or it rarely disappoints, Ellie, and we hope it doesn't this afternoon. 2 o'clock, there's plenty riding on this. Tottenham have their own ambitions of getting into the Champions League, with Aston Villa having dropped points yesterday later on against Chelsea. That opens the door with them slightly, or for them slightly, Tottenham this is, but they do have 3 games in hand, so they've got a lot of work to do. Arsenal bearing down, hopefully, from their point of view, on a first Premier League title since 2004, 20 years this summer. Arsene Wenger was in charge. They were the Invincibles. In a lot of those years since then, they've been the Invisibles. So this time around, they are technically trailing Manchester City because City have a game in hand, and we all know that City tend to win their games in hand. But there's a huge incentive going to North London today, or going across 3 miles across from Finsbury Park over to the Tottenham High Road to see if they can get a result. But it promises to be explosive. And as I say, it's one of those derbies. A lot of these derbies get very tense, and we see the players play within themselves, and it affects the crowd as well. This one doesn't seem to be like that. They really go at each other, and hopefully it'll produce some fireworks this afternoon, because it will have a bearing on the Premier League title race and a little bit below that in the Champions League race as well.
I'm sure it will.
It's going to be interesting. What's going on with Rafa? Because he's sort of doing all right, isn't he, at the minute? But he's got this injury.
Yeah, it's an abdominal injury. He's had lots of injuries. It's mainly the knees, because he's so proficient on clay and on hard courts that it does do damage to your joints. So since the 2022 Australian Open victory, when he beat Daniel Medvedev, coming from 2 sets down, he's not really been at it. He said that he's had major injuries. He said that this season will be his last on the tour. But yesterday he beat Alex de Minaur, the Australian, at the Madrid Open, having been beaten by the same player in Barcelona 10 years ago, probably.
Feels like.
I'm not on form today, am I? Goodness me. 10 days ago, sorry. And so he's gearing up for the French Open, you would think. That starts on May 26th. There's a little bit of lead time there. Now, whatever shape Rafa Nadal is in, you don't want to be facing him in Paris, because he's an outstanding player in that tournament. He's been an outstanding player everywhere, but he's won that tournament 13 times, and he's looking to make it a 14th. And I think anyone else who has designs on that tournament, they don't want to see him in the draw. But even if it's to be his last tournament, or one of his last tournaments, it'd be great to see him at a really big event last time, wouldn't it? He's been brilliant. He's been brilliant for his sport. He's a wonderful individual, and I've met him a few times. Been lucky enough to interview him.
He seems like a nice fella.
Oh, he is, yeah, without doubt. I mean, that group all are. I mean, Djokovic rubs people up the wrong way, but he's still a decent guy as well. He just has a certain view on certain things. And one thing about these individual sports is that they do have to be self-centred. They do have to look after themselves. They do have to do right by themselves, and they have to manage their bodies. And so those 3 particularly include, and Murray I would add to that list as well. I'm talking about Federer, Nadal, Djokovic. Let's enjoy them while at least 2 of them are still around, because tennis is going to change when they go completely. It's starting to change already, and we are going to miss them like crazy.
Yeah, that we will. Aidan, thank you very much indeed.
Good to see you this weekend, guys.
And you.
You too.
Right, don't go anywhere, because we've got Stephanie Tecci and Andy Jones taking us through the papers in just a moment.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the quaint Derbyshire village of Sudbury, there's a storm brewing between the local football club and the National Trust. This grass field might seem unremarkable, but for hundreds of years it's been part of the Sudbury Hall estate, playing host to the village football and cricket matches. Now the National Trust are planning to put an end to that tradition in the name of biodiversity, with plans for trees and plants where the football club play. Some worry it breaks a memorandum of wishes from the late Lord Vernon, whose family have lived here since 1660. Manager of Sudbury FC Tom Crutchley says he's upset at the decision.
Naturally disappointed. We've been here, this is our 9th year. We've put a lot of effort into here to keep playing, to maintain it. I'm from the village originally, so personally it was very it is very upsetting.
MP for Derbyshire Dale Sarah Dines says the National Trust aren't respecting the history of the site.
I feel they're trampling over the wishes of historic owners who gave up this wonderful site for the nation. And for over 100 years, people have played football and cricket here. It's incredibly sad. Incredibly sad. And it's against the wishes of a lot of people locally who've written to me from the village.
Sudbury Hall lives under the branding of the Children's Country House, a decision which Dines says is disrespectful to the history of the estate.
I mean, this is fake to make it into a children's theme park. It's almost a reimagining. And in fact, that's the very words it says on their website. The house is reopened. It's been reimagined. I don't want our heritage to be reimagined. I think the National Trust has been captured by people who have different ideas than most people in this country.
Whilst the public will still be able to roam these historic grounds, the village feels like a legacy is being snatched away. Jack Carson, GB News, Sudbury.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
All right, let's see what's in the papers for you this morning. Stephanie Tedeschi and Andy Jones are here. Morning, you two.
Morning.
Let's kick off with a bit of potholes, Andy, in the Times Online.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is... if you go door to door out on the streets and speaking to the public, potholes comes up all the time. It's never talked about by government. Costs us $16 billion a year. Well, Blackpool, who is one of the most economically deprived parts of the country, apparently they've cracked the pothole problem. And I know people in Blackpool who are watching the show will go, I saw a pothole on the way to Sainsbury's yesterday. But they, rather than... previously, Blackpool had a position where you would report a pothole, they would go out and measure the pothole and go, should we treat it or should we not? And then there'd be a whole sort of administrative process. Now they're actually doing a proactive process where they've got people going out looking for potholes and filling the holes, which I'd have thought was common sense. And apparently they were spending $1.3 million a year in compensation to drivers who'd hit potholes.
Right.
And now they're spending absolutely zero. And they claim, says the Times, that they had around 2,700 potholes and now they've got rid of nearly all of them.
Right, well, let's take our lead from Blackpool.
This is from a guy, Will Britton, who's worked for Blackpool Council in the potholes department for 43 years. And he finally rolled up his sleeves and said, I've had enough of this administrative process. We're just going to go out and just treat them at source. And that's what they're doing. And instead of spending, I don't know, 75 quid on each pothole, they're now spending £4.50 a hole.
Oh, really? Yeah. Is that because they're doing so many, just the costs come down?
Yeah, so what normally happens... sorry, this is very interesting. Potholes. What happens is you normally report the pothole, they go out and measure it, see if it's worth filling, see what they're doing. Whole process. Now they're just saying, oh, well, look, there's almost a hole there, let's fill it, let's deal with it.
Yeah.
Which is why I thought was quite a sensible thing to do anyway.
Yeah.
Well Blackpool.
Very sensible.
What I say.
Stephanie, this one caught my eye this morning, and it shines a light, really, doesn't it, on the wealth divide at Oxford University. Tell us a bit more about this.
It really does, I think. Really inspiring story from a student there called Chloe Pomfret. She comes from Manchester, where she lived in supported accommodation with her grandfather, and she's luckily found a way out of poverty now at Oxford. But she's finding it hard to survive there because obviously she's not being funded by the bank of mum and dad. So to survive there, she's been taking cleaning jobs where she's been cleaning students' rooms, serving dinners. So instead of calling them servants, they call them scouts. But you know, her fellow students have been calling her council estate Chloe, and you know, you just think in this day and age where working class people want to aspire or send their children to places like Oxford, this is the kind of experiences they are having. And I think it's a shame that, you know, rather than her spending time on studying, she's having to think, how do I survive in Oxford, and then being looked down by her peers. So
yeah, I mean, in some respects, it's like the fact she's having to work and is no different to any other student elsewhere across the country. But of course, she's mixing with people who've
Yeah.
Got a lot of money.
And she's done really well because basically she's campaigned within the university to allow her to work during term time because that wasn't allowed. And, of course, that wouldn't have been a problem for other students. But it's just a shame, like, you know, even to go to the college ball is £446, which, you know, is nothing to students who come from wealthy backgrounds. But someone like Chloe, it's quite hard.
And they're several times a term as well, which I
Yeah,
didn't
they
realise. I
are.
thought it was just an annual thing.
They are.
But it's a big expense, actually, to go to these things.
Of course, and it creates a divide of those who can go and those who can't. And also, obviously, these students at Oxford, these ones who are calling their council estate Chloe, will be our future CEOs, our future politicians, our future leaders, and they never meet people from council estates, and they see them, treat them almost as wildlife, you know, these sort of unusual creatures. And you see it in the way we govern as a country, where we have people in power who have no idea what the rest of Britain is like, the realities of people in different parts of the country, and this manifestation of it you see in this story of this student is exactly what we then see in government and public life.
If I was a boss, I would hire Chloe because,
absolutely,
again, it's shown determination. She's getting all these skills of tenacity, which probably other students who don't have to work as hard don't have because they're being fed everything on a plate.
And also, they should not be calling her council estate Chloe. They should be extra nice to her because if she's cleaning their dorms, she knows all their secrets.
Dirty secrets.
That's a fair point.
That
the
is
future
true.
leaders, she'll have all of the goss. Chloe will have the goss.
Oh, good on you, Chloe, though, for working so hard. We've not got much time left. Let's look at Bridget Jones, should we? There's going to be no weight
shaming. Well, you know, we've been on this journey with Bridget in the previous 3 films and she's always, you know, struggling with her weight, which most women do. But sources from the new film, which is going to be called Mad About the Boy, saying that they won't be focused on Bridget's weight obsession because they're trying to reflect where society is at the moment in terms of different body types, and they think it would be a bad influence to portray Bridget going through her weight struggles. But this is what women like about Bridget, because she's real. You know, we all go through weight struggles, and to see it in a movie where obviously it's not being toxic about eating disorders or anything, I think it's taken a bit too far. Just let Bridget be a bit fat and complain about it.
See, I never got that with Bridget Jones in the films because she was only 9 stone or something.
Yeah.
When she got on the scales and then she'd moan about being fat.
So that's what people are saying is a wrong portrayal. But I think in terms of women complaining about that weight, that's what most women do.
Yeah. I don't think they should be worried about her weight. I think they should be worried about storylines. I mean, the third film was absolutely terrible. I've got no idea what this woman can possibly do with herself now. But we end up with this thing with films broadly where they no longer reflect public life because we're policing what goes on. So obviously women, you know, certainly lots of women I know are worried about their weight, but we can't now talk about what people are actually talking about because it's not reflective of this sort of public agenda of, I don't know, body positivity and mental health and whatever, and that someone might see this and it might trigger something. But then the film should reflect the good and bad of real life.
And if you are going to be triggered, then don't watch it.
Well,
It's simple as let a film be a narrative that it's supposed to be, or eventually we're going to be watching films which are going to be completely watered down because they have to cater to so many people.
Yeah, you don't want everything to be sanitised. If you've got an aversion to big knickers, don't watch Bridget Jones. I mean, that's,
Good advice.
I think if you're triggered watching Bridget Jones, I think your problems are significantly broader than a film.
Ooh.
I think I've seen the first one. I don't know if I've seen any others.
No, I think I'm the same as you. I think I've only seen maybe the first 2. But Stephanie, Andy, great to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Stephen, one question for you. Stargate, Star Trek or Star Wars? Where is your allegiance, says Lorna Robson.
Oh, I like all in different ways.
Star Trek, I'd say.
Star Trek, probably.
Yeah, there you go.
Stargate's brilliant, though.
Have you got any of the outfits?
No, he doesn't. Let's go to the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update for the Met Office for GB News. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across the UK today. Rain at times towards the east, generally a bit brighter the further west you go, but temperatures still struggling for the time of year. Confirmation then of a pretty wet picture across some central and many eastern parts of England. Towards the southeast we could see skies brightening briefly, but this could set off some pretty heavy, potentially even thundery showers for a time. Whereas towards the west and northwest are generally bright today here, but again notice a few showers dotted around as we go through the day. Temperatures really struggling under the rain towards the east, coupled with quite a strong northerly breeze, no better than 9 or 10 degrees in places here, whereas in the best of the sunshine further west we'll see highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. As we go through the evening into the overnight period, those outbreaks of rain will push away to the northeast, affecting the Northern Isles into the early hours of Monday. Elsewhere, it will turn clearer for a time, but notice further showers gathering out towards the west, some of those starting to merge to longer spells of rain towards the morning. And other clear spells out towards the east, it will turn quite chilly. Could see a local frost by Monday morning in 1 or 2 spots, but generally those temperatures picking back up as these showers come back in across the west there. As for Monday, well, again, an east-west split developing in the weather, but this time a reversal of fortunes, with the east and southeast seeing the best of the dry and bright weather. Whereas out towards the west, there will be plenty of showers around, those showers again merging at times to some longer spells of rain. And although pretty wet out towards the west, temperatures generally starting to pick up, with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius towards the north, up to 15 or 16 degrees in the southeast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wine. What is it?
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Many of the people that you had invited to come and speak were people who've been elected in their own countries. I'm thinking of people like Suella Braverman. I'm thinking of Nigel Farage, who has been a member of the European Parliament, of course, had an enormous impact on British politics. And Viktor Orban, who has been elected and re-elected. Many people may not care for the Prime Minister of Hungary, but he's certainly an elected person.
And in addition, we had about 15 to 16 members of the European Parliament who were also elected, and they really live in Brussels. And you would imagine that Brussels, being the head of the capital of the EU, would allow elected members of its own parliament to have an opportunity to voice their views. So I think what was very interesting about this is that the mayors overplayed their hands, so that because they overplayed their hands, all public opinion became entirely on our side. It was so evident, so transparent, that this was really an attempt to use the police instead of arguments to react to our conference, that it was a real direct threat, and it is still a direct threat to the freedom of assembly and to free speech.
So how do you think it leaves it? Is it more likely or less likely that there'll be future bans?
I think this is a trial run. What I'm really worried about is that if the future of democracy and free speech depends on the ruling of one judge, and you have to remember that 3 other judges ruled against us, then democracy is in big trouble. What worries me absolutely is that a strong body of political opinion amongst established politicians believes that it is okay to cancel conferences and to crush the people's opinions and prevent the freedom of assembly. Democracy actually depends on these foundational values.
Morning to you, it's 9 o'clock on Sunday the 28th of April. Today, Tory rebels plotting to oust the PM following Dan Poulter's defection to Labour.
Is the Rwanda plan already working? Well, the Prime Minister thinks so, as he says migrants heading to Ireland shows the scheme is a deterrent.
But in Ireland, anger's brewing over the government's approach to housing asylum seekers, with protests planned for today.
I'm at Newtown, Mount Kennedy, that is now at the very front of Ireland's immigration row.
A dangerous escalation or essential to deliver aid? The government considers deploying British troops on the ground in Gaza.
Hello, good morning. We'll see an east-west split in our weather today across the UK. Rain at times in the east, generally a little bit brighter the further west you go. I'll have all the details later.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
The opinionated engineer's been in touch over potholes.
Oh, yeah.
Says it's a case of systemic mismanagement from all parties that has resulted in shoddy repairs and poor quality control. It's probably a very fair point, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's one of those... They are just getting so bad, potholes.
They are so bad.
And yet no one seems to get on top of them.
They're so dangerous as well, aren't they?
There's some at the bottom of the M1. I mean, it's on a blooming motorway, and you peel off at the bottom, and it's terrible. You could really crash your car on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so dangerous, and they are everywhere at the moment. Mark Sharrock says, these pothole repairs tend to be short-term repairs. Most roads are looking like a patchwork quilt.
That's
very true.
And someone got in touch before to say, and I don't quite know what point you were trying to make. Oh, here you go. It's Sean Newry, who says Blackpool Council is now Labour-run after a few recent years of Tory control, isn't it? Don't know. I don't know. And really, I don't care who runs the council. But if they're doing a great job with the potholes, brilliant. Let's export that idea across the country.
On potholes and techniques to fix them, Jackie Phoenix says proper packing of the soil while building the road will prevent potholes. Too bad successive governments have been cutting corners for far too long. There you go.
Because well, anyway, I mean, it all falls under local government control, doesn't it, on most highways anyway. But it's got to be sorted out. It is just ridiculous. If Blackpool has managed to sort it out, I'm sure the rest of the councils could.
Perhaps we should follow their lead.
I think we should. See what they're doing.
Do keep those views coming in. gbnews.com/your say.
All right, let's talk about Tory rebels, should we, who are on a warpath following the defection of the Conservative MP Daniel Poulter to the Labour Party yesterday.
Well, according to The Telegraph, a group of Tory MPs are working on a 100-day roadmap to turn around their election chances, which involves a new policy blitz and installing Penny Mordaunt as Prime Minister.
Well, of course, it all follows on from that defection of Dan Poulter yesterday. Let's talk to Camilla Tominey, who's going to be here at 9:30 with her own politics show. I mean, in a sense, Camilla, as far as the rebels are concerned, I mean, this defection is just what they needed to sort of light the blue touch paper for them, isn't it?
Absolutely. But the timing of it's really intriguing because actually Rishi Sunak's had quite a good week. He's had a good week with the Rwanda bill passing through the Commons at last. And he's had a good week with the increase in defence spending, which many on the right had been calling for, to raise that amount to 2.5% of GDP. So all in all, it was quite good and going quite well until, of course, the Observer has got this expose about Dan Poulter having been in conversation with Labour for quite some time. So this has been a kind of long-planned, calculated manoeuvre for Poulter to defect to Labour. He's a doctor, and it is damning. He's saying that he can't look his patients in the eye because of the state of the NHS. I mean, on the other hand, you could perhaps point to Labour's management of the NHS in Wales and say that the jury remains out on whether Labour will do a better job with the health service than the Tories. And that's, of course, one of the attack lines coming out of Conservative Central Office this morning. When it comes to this rebellion, I mean, we've heard from these people before, haven't we? There are many caucuses within the Tory party on the right that seem to be squabbling over who they want to succeed Rishi Sunak. You've got others who think even the merest idea of trying to replace the Prime Minister now, again, is complete folly. And this is all intermingled with suggestions that the Prime Minister might go for an earlier election in June or July rather than autumn, as we thought had been planned. But then there are arguments for and against that. I'm going to be asking my guests on the show all about this. So Chris Philp, the policing minister's coming on. I don't know if you guys saw it, but he had a little bit of a muddle earlier in the week when he appeared on television and seemed to confuse Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I'll be asking Mr Philp whether he does know the difference between those two countries. I'll also be speaking to Wes Streeting. I'd like to know what personal conversations he had with Dan Poulter ahead of this defection, because, of course, Wes Streeting's the man hoping to be the next health secretary.
Yeah, well, as far as Chris Philp goes, I mean, that was a mess. I'm a bit surprised he's back on the screen so quickly, in a way, but it'll be interesting to see what he says. Wes Streeting's going to be an interesting one, though. We were talking about it in the papers earlier on, Camilla. The idea with everything that is going wrong in the health service, as Dan Poulter will testify to from his perspective, Wes Streeting's the only man out there, isn't he, who could actually enforce some real reform within the NHS, because the Labour Party is capable of doing more than the Tories ever could on that, aren't they?
Yeah, as long as he can win the argument. I mean, it's quite interesting to see Wes Streeting slightly out on a limb on some of these issues when it comes to at least the harder left caucus of his own party, because he has talked in the past about sort of quasi-privatisation and talked about contracting operations and procedures out more to private hospitals to get those waiting lists down. I mean, that suggestion is often anathema to the left, but he's going ahead with it. It's been quite reasonable as well on the junior doctors' strike, saying that 35% pay claim was unreasonable, which again has set him more in the right of the party when it comes to the handling of the NHS. But I mean, at the end of the day, just as the Labour Party might be inheriting a difficult economic legacy, they're still going to be inheriting, 8 or 9 million strong waiting lists. So what's his solution to that? I'm also going to be asking him about the Rwanda plan. There's been some interesting coverage in the Mail on Sunday today suggesting that Ursula von der Leyen and others in the EU are wanting to ape this scheme. What I can't quite work out is Labour says that as soon as it comes to power, it's going to scrap the Rwanda scheme. And I want to ask Mr. Streeting, what really? Even if it does prove to be a deterrent, even if it's a success, because we saw Labour have a similar outcry in Australia when Tony Abbott introduced these measures back in, I think, 2014. And now the Labour Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has stuck with them because he knows it works. So there's a lot to go at this morning, guys.
Packed programme. Camilla, thank you very much. We'll see you at 9:30.
Yeah, going to be fascinating, that one. Now, talk about Rwanda, as we were there. Let's look at the situation in Ireland, because there's been a recent influx of migrants crossing the border from Northern Ireland into the Republic. And that's sort of being linked to the Rwanda plan already being a deterrent, apparently.
Well, latest government figures indicate there are 1,758 people who have sought asylum in Ireland who are without an offer of state accommodation.
Well, Ireland's Foreign Minister, Micheál Martin, has connected Britain's Rwanda policy to their failure to control migration after Brexit.
Well, let's cross over to Doogie Beattie, who is live for us this morning. Good to see you this morning, Doogie. And there are simmering tensions, aren't there, in the Republic over migration?
Yes, good morning and welcome to Newtown, Mount Kennedy. This is one of the most picturesque places, the most liberal places on the island of Ireland. It is an absolutely stunning place. The Wicklow Mountains just in behind us there, this is a holiday destination. It is a beautiful place, but of course you can see here, Stephen, Ellie, there is now barriers on a main road, the Garda Síochána standing in behind there. And if we just walk this way here, you can see that there is a GAA pitch now. Are really the heart of any community in Ireland. It is a big social gathering place. It's also a place where a lot of sport takes place. And the people now cannot enter this pitch because just beyond these guards behind us over here is an old convent school, and it was not back to the community. In fact, it has now been taken to house 160 immigrant men, now currently in Dublin, sleeping in tents. And the problem of that is, of course, the locals here, this would be like you putting this into Surrey. These people pay thousands in rates. They want to be here because it's beautiful. The prices of houses here are so much, and they are now getting this type of thing coming into them. And I spoke to Kevin Haig late last night to find out exactly what the community were thinking.
And the proposal is to put 20 8-man tents onto the site to house 160 young men. We feel that's morally wrong. You can't just dump people in a field in Wicklow and expect things to go well. It's a very community-led protest, and right from the start we've kept it very non-political. We're not interested in right-wing politics. We're not interested in racism or anything like that. This is community people saying this is wrong for our community.
Well, unfortunately for this community here, the Public Order Unit of the Garda Síochána decided to enforce the law on them in a very physical way just a few nights ago, and that has really brought tensions up, and that community has now lost faith in these Garda Síochána. I spoke to a lady here just a few moments ago who was brought up in this community. She was brought up to respect the police, and she says now she has none. She's heartbroken and was in tears.
OK, Doogie, for now, thank you.
Now, British troops could be deployed on the ground in Gaza to help deliver aid via a new sea route.
Yeah, the US has said that no American forces would go ashore, and they said an unnamed third party would drive trucks along a floating causeway onto the beach.
Well, the UK is understood to be considering tasking British troops with this when the aid corridor opens next month.
Whitehall sources said no decision had been made, and both the MOD and the Israeli army have declined to comment.
Well, earlier we spoke with defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox.
British troops could do, and some might say it's the sort of thing that British troops ought to do. But we have the terrible cover, as it were, of the American argument that they won't put their troops in harm's way. And in this kind of operation, America has form. America held up going into Kosovo in 1999 because they were worried about force protection. There was very little opposition. It's very strange the way they operate. They're very well aware of force protection, by the way, in Afghanistan, and yet took huge amounts of casualties when they took over a hotspot like Sangin from British forces. Now, the wider aid operation, I think, is going to be a very important and always has been an important part of British forces. But I do understand the reticence of Whitehall, and particularly Number 10, in that they want cover and guarantees. I think, one, there must be a UN mandate, and I think the Israelis, Hamas and Islamic Jihad must be explained what the rules of engagement are. There is a potential of vulnerability from either side, but I think it can be done. But I think Britain would want to do it with an ally, and I would suspect that would be a Scandinavian and possibly France.
Well, couldn't you? I mean, why can't it be done on? And I don't know quite how these things work, Robert, but under the banner of UN peacekeeping.
I think that's exactly what it would be if they were blue helmets. We're only talking, I think, of a few hundred drivers. It's quite limited, but they are, as you rightly read in your from your intro, that they're going on the beach. They are potentially in harm's way, but I'm finding this very, very difficult. Potentially, that's what happens to soldiers, people in the armed services. You don't expect to get killed or shot, but risk is inherent in it. And this is a very good thing. I think Lord Cameron will want this to happen because it gives Britain leverage. They really want to bring the whole Gaza, Rafah business to a conclusion within weeks. That's when they've really got to push the Israelis on that as well as Hamas, because they really want it wrapped up. And who wants it most of all? Joe Biden, because he doesn't want to go into a general election campaign. That is the election post the conventions for the presidency, with all this hanging around still. He's going to have Ukraine, and he's going to have Ukraine big time, and he's still got the Houthis. But he wants this one, I think, resolved. Whether he'll get it, I think it's about 50-50 at the moment.
What is the situation with the aid corridors in Gaza at the moment, by land and by sea? Well,
there is limited access. A certain amount seems to be delivered on the periphery. And I'm not going to use fancy words because it's completely the wrong way to do it. This building, this elaborate, ingenious idea of building an offshore harbour causeway facility Sounds fantastic, doesn't it? And we've seen all the grainy black and white films and documentaries and not mockumentaries about World War II and the Mulberry Harbour after D-Day, which was such a success. This absolutely isn't the way to do it. You want a humanitarian corridor from the north, and it would have to be the south, considering the bulk of the population. So many of the refugees of the Palestinians have now gone to the south, up from Egypt, but parties are not willing to do it. And that's what a robust UN would do. You would have guaranteed humanitarian corridors with very robust rules of engagement. Oops. Think of getting that past the Security Council with China and Russia having a veto.
Yeah. Look, sort of closer to home, if you like, Robert. What's this about a hypersonic missile that we're planning to build in the UK?
Well, we're playing a bit of catch-up there, but hypersonics are all over the place, and there's a dreadful fear that the Chinese particularly are ahead, and the Russians have been using them. They've been quite effective in downing them. But this is why things are so tricky. It's funny, we're talking about Gaza. I mean, the things are on a knife edge over the next few days and weeks in Ukraine, as we see the battle, the breakout from Avdiivka and Bakhmut at this mountain or high place called Chaziv Yar. The problem is it's all being done by electronic warfare. It's very difficult to envisage this because somebody who had been on the front line was explaining to me, you put up drones, you put up this, that and the other, and you have to go through what he called was an electronic barrier hidden, which is downing a lot of the drones on both sides. This is why we got the announcement in Poland from the Prime Minister is, gosh, we're getting into the game. We're very good on certain kinds of weaponry, but we are late on a lot of it. We are, although we have global ambitions, we're not a global power, and we need pals. And I think the reliable pals are emerging to be from the north, the Nordics, the Scandinavians, the Baltics, which are small, and Poland.
Oh, OK. Robert, good to see you.
That's Robert Fox speaking to us a little bit earlier on. Now, some good news for you this morning. It's our biggest cash prize to date, a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash. It could all be yours in our latest Great British giveaway. That's enough cash to spend this summer in style, we think. This is how it could all be yours.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh, dear.
Oh, my God, are you joking?
You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wine. What is it?
Oh, my God. This is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yeah, best of luck to you on that one. Coming up, we're going to be joined by X Factor winner Sam Bailey, looking at the difficulty of getting support after her son was diagnosed with autism.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Tubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations. Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where. We need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK, and and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. They could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is, what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primer stove and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles. Absolutely. They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead at, actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, the X Factor winner, Sam Bailey, has spoken movingly about her son's autism diagnosis and admitted that getting the right level of help can be incredibly difficult. I'm very pleased to say that Sam joins us now this morning. Good to see you this morning, Sam.
Hi,
and we
guys.
know your face, we know your voice so well from you winning the X Factor back in 2013. But you've actually had quite a difficult time, haven't you, with your son Tommy and getting the right support for him at school. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, so I knew the transition from primary school to secondary school was going to be difficult for him. And I think as parents, we were kind of in denial that there was anything untoward that was different or anything. And we were told that he would really struggle and to get a diagnosis. I actually went private to get his diagnosis. And by doing that, it was a quicker process, but it was after that diagnosis was the hard part, because you have to kind of prove that he can't be in a mainstream school. He would bang his head against the wall. He really, really struggled at school. He didn't go for a year and a half. He really, really struggled, and there was nowhere for him. He didn't have an education. No one. He just festered at home. He put on weight. He was threatening to take his life. So we had a really, really tough time. And I went to the doctors on my own and said to the doctors, I'm really concerned about my son. Hello. I said, I'm really concerned about my son because of how he's being. I was like, he's saying some stuff. And they said that we can't deal with this. There needs to be autism outreach. I'm like, I'm going to a doctor's because of my son, and they turn me away. I've got a letter to say that the GP turned my son away because he was feeling low, and told us to go to the National Autistic Society, I think it was, which I was like baffled by, absolutely baffled.
Well, I mean, it beggars belief, Sam, and I hate to say that we're really tight for time, but what would your advice be for any parent in the same situation?
My advice to anybody is to contact your local CENDIAS. That is www.kids.org.co.uk, I think it is. And that's your local CENDIAS, SENDIASS. And they are on your side. They will help you fight your corner. They're an amazing, amazing bunch of people in your local area. You will have a CENDIAS.
Okay.
I didn't know any of this.
Well, no,
and that's why it's so
won't.
important that you've been talking about it this morning. I'm so sorry we haven't had long with you. It's only because it's the end of the programme, but so good to see you, Sam Bailey, and best wishes to Tommy as well.
And anyone in that situation. That's it from us. Thanks for your company. Camilla Tomlin is here next.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update for the Met Office for GB News. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across the UK today. Rain at times towards the east, generally a bit brighter the further west you go, but temperatures still struggling for the time of year. Confirmation then of a pretty wet picture across some central and many eastern parts of England. Towards the southeast we could see skies brightening briefly, but this could set off some pretty heavy, potentially even thundery showers for a time. Whereas towards the west and northwest are generally bright today here, but again notice a few showers dotted around as we go through the day. Temperatures really struggling under the rain towards the east, coupled with quite a strong northerly breeze, no better than 9 or 10 degrees in places here, whereas in the best of the sunshine further west we'll see highs of 12 or 13 Celsius. As we go through the evening into the overnight period, those outbreaks of rain will push away to the northeast, affecting the Northern Isles into the early hours of Monday. Elsewhere it will turn clearer for a time, but notice further showers gathering out towards the west, some of those starting to merge to longer spells of rain towards the morning. And other clear spells out towards the east, it will turn quite chilly. Could see a local frost by Monday morning in 1 or 2 spots, but generally those temperatures picking back up as these showers come back in across the west there. As for Monday, well, again an east-west split developing in the weather, but this time a reversal of fortunes, with the east and southeast seeing the best of the drama.